Chair Rios, when you're ready, we are live.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Historic Districts Review Board. Today, we are January the 23rd, 2024. And may we have a roll call, please, Melissa?
Yes, Chair Rios.
Here.
Vice Chair Guida.
Here.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
Here.
Member Beachside.
Here.
Member Bienvenu.
Here.
Member Mather.
Here.
Member Valdo.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Are there any changes to the agenda? Staff?
Chair Rios, there are no changes.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Guida so moves.
Aguilar Madrano seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
Yes.
Member Beachside.
Yes.
Member Bienvenu.
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
Member Mather.
Yes.
Member Valdo.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Minutes of January the 9th, 2024. Changes to these minutes? Anybody on the board? Anybody on staff? Member Bienvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 10 of the January 9 minutes, I would ask for the following changes. Where it states in the middle of the page, Member Bienvenu said he did not vote at the last meeting because he was acting chair. The Hickby by Mr. Murphy at the behest of the applicant. Strike the words has been before the comma. Then continue in terms of its final conclusions and recommendations, comma, strike as having, and replace that with has no, and then continue with greater weight than staff's view and judgment, or, and then strike the word of, and continue the board's view and judgment, period. Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve as amended.
Guida moves to approve as amended.
Beachside seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Beachside.
Yes.
Member Bienvenu.
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
Member Mather.
Yes.
Member Valdo.
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
Same.
Thank you. The motion has been approved.
Thank you. We have two findings of fact and conclusions of law, both dated January the 9th, 2024. Changes to either one of these?
Madam Chair, before we begin on the findings of fact and conclusions of law, I have a question or two for staff about the findings.
In reference to the finding? Or what is it in reference to?
In reference to findings of fact. Yes. So just a couple questions for staff. Last hearing, and I really appreciate the staff having done this, grouping the findings of fact and conclusions of law by the hearing date. And we had probably, we had findings of fact and conclusions of law from probably 7 or so different hearings that stretched all the way back to 7 months ago, to June. I guess my question, and perhaps this is best directed at the Assistant City Attorney, is what happens when a finding of fact and conclusions of law is not written until 7 months after the hearing? Are applicants' permits held up because they do not have a determination letter from the board? Or can they proceed with permits? And then the second question is, we have a rule that anybody from the public or the applicant can appeal to City Council 2 weeks after the findings of fact and conclusions of law. If it's not held up by it waiting 7 months, there is the possibility that a project could be built, at which point somebody then might be able to appeal a decision. So I'm just wondering the timeline here, because it's so delayed and it's so different than what we had practiced in the past. How do we square that?
Madam Chair and Member Guida, that is an important question, and the answer is found in the appeal. There's an appeal process that is found at Santa Fe City Code 14-3.17. And essentially the appeal deadline starts running 15 days after the board approves the written findings of fact and conclusions of law, which are on the agenda. However, the applicant or the party wishing to appeal doesn't have to wait forever. Under 14-3.17 subsection C,
one, C, appeal deadline starts running 15 days from the date of the final action for all other appeals other than things like summary subdivision and that sort of thing, which don't apply here. For final actions of land use boards or the governing body, and the H board is a land use board, the date the body adopts a written decision containing findings of fact and conclusions of law, provided that if such body has not adopted findings of fact and conclusions of law within 35 days of the date the vote deciding the matter was taken, then the date of final action shall be deemed to be the 35th such day. So essentially, the appeal deadline starts running 35 days after the hearing on the project if the board has not adopted the finding of fact and conclusions of law.
Okay.
There were delays in composing and editing the findings of fact and conclusions of law, and for which I offer my apologies for some delays that were attributable to me because I was I've been assigned to nuisance properties, and there was a period where one particular nuisance property ate up quite a bit of my time. And at this point, we are almost completely caught up. There's one from last year that I'm waiting for a draft, and then we're reviewing the fact finding of the board with respect to the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, which was heard January 9th. But so at this time, we're doing well in getting those submitted in a timely manner. My understanding is, unless those findings of fact and conclusions of law are approved by the board, no permit goes out. I don't have anything to do with the permitting process, but on occasion, I believe we do have some project applicants that ask, hey, where are my findings and conclusions? Because I'm ready to go and I need my permit, in which case, we try to expedite that to get those.
Well, so that's the thing that I'm most concerned about is the delay in permitting for applicants. Heather, yes.
Yes, thank you, Chair Rios, Member Guida. Immediately after the hearing, there is an approval letter that is sent out to the applicant unless there's a vacation delay of some sort. And so that approval letter does allow an applicant to apply for a permit. And for a while, as you may recall, we had staffing challenges and all of that. And we've been able to do a lot of catch up, and much thanks to Rebecca Clauser, who is our planning tech for historic preservation. She's actually been through and doing the catch up on that and the recording and organizing, HPD staff so that we can going forward be time.
One more question related to kind of delays in process and the peculiar situation that we were in because of this delay in the text amendment. My understanding is from some other architects and applicants is that the city is now directing applicants who had cases where this board was not able to rule because they had design exceptions. Those cases did not have the opportunity to go to city council before the text amendment was passed. But those cases are now in limbo and being asked to return and be heard again at H board. I find this really confounding and kind of appalling. I'm actually thinking about the number of applicants that might be caught in this scenario. And I'm wondering, A, does the city have an idea of how many people were caught in this trap? I mean, the incredible inconvenience of this to applicants in terms of delays and such, and what is the city prepared to do rather than try cases again in front of this board, wasting the public's time, wasting these volunteer boards' time and staff's time? Can we arrive at a consent agenda for these cases so that we can just move on past this period where we had this delay because of this text interpretation?
Madam Chair and Member Guida, I have discussed this with my supervisor, Erin McSherry, and she believes since there was a change essentially in the jurisdictional scope of the board, that the board now has the authority to approve exceptions, whereas under a literal reading of the code as it existed before the most recent amendment to the code, those should come back to the board, and there would be sort of a expedited process. The what we've discussed is that the planner would stand on the previous presentation and we would describe in the minutes what the previous vote was. And the board would vote to either approve or disapprove the exceptions rather than going to the governing body. And I think we all agreed that, first of all, this board has and has always had the subject matter expertise to make those decisions. The land use cases are always at the very end of the governing body meetings. So, they end up being heard sometimes at 11 o'clock midnight. I had one that started at about 12:30 a.m. And I don't think under those circumstances, that's the best, scenario to present these. I think I agree with my boss that they should come back to this board. I don't know how many of them there will be, but several of them will be presented at the first meeting in February.
To be clear, we are not rehearing the cases. We are reviewing the ruling and basically validating it with our new authority. And that this will attempt to catch all the cases that are caught in this scenario.
Well, it will attempt to catch all the cases that are caught in this scenario, yes.
Okay.
But how much you want to re-review the case is up to the board. If the board, it is a presentation to a board which now has a new jurisdictional scope.
Isn't there a due process issue associated with the
There's-
cases being
yes.
having to be heard twice? I mean, this is not fair to applicants.
Well, we have to consider due process all the way around, not just to applicants. We have to consider the city of Santa Fe that has a due process. We have to consider the historic preservation, and we have to consider the public. All of them have a due process right. You can carry on the discussion as long as you wish. You can re-review it if you wish, or you can just sort of, consider what you voted on before and recast your vote at that time.
But Frank, the concern here is that this is an inconvenience caused entirely by the city attorney's office to applicants. And I think
Well,
I'm speaking only for myself, but
Yeah.
my feeling is that, we should be acting to rectify that and not cause further delays. Heather.
Well, Madam Chair and Member Guida, I'm sorry about the inconvenience, but that cannot control the entire proceeding. We've had a change in the code. The board has a new scope of authority, and we have deemed it to be the best approach to bring it back to the board for it to be presented to the board. I don't know that the board's going to change its mind on any of those. I'm sorry about the inconvenience, but that can't be the controlling issue. We have to comply with the code. And as I said, we have to consider due process to everybody involved in the process, not just the applicants.
Now, I would, if I may contribute, would dare say that this would be more efficient than if we still had to schedule them for city council. The issue is it takes a while. We have no control over the city council schedule. And so we have to wait in line. And there were several cases at council. There's only so many land use cases that are heard per agenda. So in effect, by resolving this next hearing, we'll be able to manage those a lot faster. The effective date of the ordinance was at the end of the year, I believe December 29th. And so those decisions prior to the effective date of the ordinance, the track was that they were going to council, but actually the city attorney's office has created a shortcut per se in getting back to the board as fast as possible. So it's actually going to be better in the end for the applicants.
Okay. Thank you, Heather. Madam Chair, I'm sorry to sideline the hearing. It's an important issue related to findings of fact and conclusions of law. And I guess I'd be curious to know what the board's feelings is on this case, whether we want to hear these things all again, or, basically just revalidate board decisions based on recommendations made.
Well, that is something that can be discussed, but I think it can be discussed later on at the end of the meeting and not right now. Those were legitimate questions that you asked. And Heather, I have a question for you. You indicated that approval letters go out when the findings and conclusions have not been yet adopted, have not been yet approved. So is the applicant in limbo, or can the applicant go forward? Because we don't know if someone is going to appeal.
Chair Rios, with reference to approval letters going to the applicants, typically a permit review process takes at least 30 days. And so we have the opportunity to not issue the permit, but an applicant can apply for a permit with that approval letter. So we just track it through administratively, and we do have to review those permits. And so that is the sort of check, if check and balance type of situation. So if there's not been a final adoption, then the permit is not issued until after that. And typically permit review takes long enough that it's a non-issue.
Yeah.
But it does allow for the building industry, the construction industry to get started, at least on the permit review.
Thank you. If there is nothing further to discuss in reference to this discussion that we've just had, I will ask if there are any changes to the findings and conclusions of January the 9th. And if not, I will entertain a motion to approve. Board members, Member Menu?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no changes, and I would move to approve findings of fact and conclusions of law in 2023-007525 HDRB 913.5 Acequia Madre and 2023-007676 HDRB 410 Camino Cabra.
Wait seconds.
Roll call vote, please, Melissa.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida,
Yes.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Valdo,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Abstain.
Member Beachside.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Matters from the public. Is there anyone in this room that wishes to speak at this time in reference to things that are not related specifically to cases that we're going to hear this evening? Please come forward.
Thank you. My name is Nicoletta Monroe. I wish to speak about a public comment from last meeting regarding the obelisk monument.
Yes, ma'am, go forward.
Shall I be sworn in?
No, you do not have to be sworn in.
My name is Nicoletta Monroe. My address is 701 Dunlap Street in Santa Fe. I live in the historic West Side Guadalupe District. I am an artist and a writer. I graduated from college with a Bachelor of Fine Art degree. I wrote an opinion article about preservation published in our local newspaper, specifically to preserve the DeForey Bridge. I have lived in Santa Fe for 17 years. Thank you, members of the board, for this opportunity to speak during public comment. I'm here to address the subject of the Soldiers Monument, which was brought forward in the HDRB meeting on January 9th from our previous City Historic Preservation Director and informally deliberated at the closing of the meeting for members of the board. The Historic Districts Review Board has authority on the Soldiers Monument obelisk. The board has not, to my knowledge, taken initiative since the October 12th, 2020 event when the monument was vandalized. There is no statement from the board on the topic of the obelisk. The Historic Districts Review Board is tasked federally and from the state and from the municipal code to protect National Register sites, in this case, the plaza, and an object there, the monument, if it so deems it has historic value, and make recommendations. The governing body cannot usurp the power of this board. It may only respond to recommendations made from the board. The board is first on historic district issues. The obelisk is a contributing resource in that it is a building, site, structure, or object that adds to the historic significance of a property. The obelisk is a contributing feature of the historic plaza. The obelisk is not in the jurisdiction of the governing body. While the city owns the plaza, the state of New Mexico owns the Soldiers Monument. The board is obligated to uphold the Municipal Code, Chapter 14, and the State Historic District and Landmark Act, Chapter 3, Article 22, NMSA 1978. The city initiated a process to gain public input on the topic of the monument. The findings are written in a report titled The Culture, History, Art, Reconciliation, and Truth Report. The chart, Santa Fe Final Report,
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? I cannot hear you. Can you hear me?
For you.
Oh, now I
Stephanie.
can finally hear you. I could not hear you. Nicoletta Monroe cut off halfway through her, all the way through Richard Martinez. Don't know why. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Thank you. I'm glad that Member Guida brought up this the date of final action, the 35-day rule, because there really are huge problems with this rule. First of all, according to the city attorney, you don't have to have anything in writing. If you did not get to adopt the minutes, or you did not get to adopt the findings of facts and conclusions of law, it would not matter. At 35 days, your oral decision becomes final. And within 15 days, somebody has to figure out how to appeal without a written decision. In addition, we just heard that you could actually get a permit issued in 30 days before it actually becomes final. I think that this 35-day rule is really problematic. And what needs to happen is not an automatic final decision, but that whatever board isn't meeting has to meet within an X amount of time and actually adopt the findings of facts and conclusions of law. And I know that you all were really upset about the power that was supposedly taken away from you about the design standards and recommendations, but that was the law and had been the law, and the city ignored the law for a very long time. And I actually think it's outrageous that you put people through a process telling them that this is a recommendation, it's going to be approved by city council, and now suddenly, no, now, even though it was not in the adoption of the text amendment, there was nothing in there that said all the pending cases are going back to the H board. It didn't say that at all. It's effective as of the end of the year, and every case decided before that needs to go to city council, or you all are not following the law, and you are definitely not following due process requirements. And I think it's really outrageous that the city attorney thinks that she can just ignore what is the law. These are the cases that were made by recommendation, and they need to go to city council unless city council wants to adopt yet another resolution saying those cases should come back to you. And, it's not our problem that the city council keeps hearing things hours after it should have stopped. Maybe there needs to be a date on which land cases are heard so that they can be heard first and for the entire meeting, so that people aren't waiting for, so much stuff that happens in between. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephanie. Anyone else on Zoom?
Yes, no.
Thank you. Staff communications. Is there anything under staff communications?
Yes, Chair Rios. The first item is a project that is going to be an administrative approval. It falls under repair and maintenance, but because it has to do with a significant building, I wanted the Museum of New Mexico to present the project to you just for your information. We actually did a site visit, Anthony Maestas and I. Anthony Maestas is a construction inspector, and went over all of the different proposed changes. And so we'll be starting a presentation in just a second as soon as we get the technology taken care of. Have you plugged in? Okay, IT, can you please bring up? Perfect. Thank you.
Good evening. I am Shannon Bay, the Deputy Director of the New Mexico Museum of Art. I'm pleased to be here to provide this informational update on an exciting project we have planned to restore and repair woodwork on the exterior of the New Mexico Museum of Art Plaza building located at 107 West Palace Avenue. This will be a phased project, and the first phase is planned to begin in the early months of 2024. Areas of the building we'll be focusing on are the south-facing front facade of the building, a balcony on the east side of the building, a balcony on the north side of the building, which overlooks our East Sculpture Garden, and structural beams on the northwest side of the building, which are located on the exterior in our loading dock and go through the wall into St. Francis Auditorium. The repairs and conservation treatments to be utilized for this project will comply with the Secretary of the Interior's standards for the treatment of historic properties. And the Museum of Art has consulted with the State of New Mexico Historic Preservation Division on this plan, and it has been approved by them to move forward. In 2021, the New Mexico Museum of Art contracted Conservation Solutions, a division of Evergreen Architectural Arts, to perform a condition assessment of the exterior architectural wood features of the Plaza building. Evergreen Architectural Arts is a leading specialist on restoration and conservation of significant architecture and historic landmarks. Project consultation was provided by A. Christopher Purvis Architects of Santa Fe. The assessment found that the remaining original wood features are generally in good condition. However, there are areas that need to be repaired, restored, or replaced. Spanning the whole of the exterior of the building are rounded log and squared timber viga ends that have been selectively replaced in the past and are in varying degrees of deterioration. A particular concern are the protruding ends of the doubled and tripled beams spanning St. Francis Auditorium, which are deteriorated and a high priority for treatment. And those are pictured on the right with the birds in them. As is the priority with historic buildings such as the New Mexico Museum of Art, refurbishing existing materials will be the priority. However, some of the woodwork will need to be replaced due to deterioration, decay, or weathering of the wood. Repairs and treatments will be visually compatible to retain aesthetic integrity of the architectural wood elements, and physically compatible so as not to accelerate deterioration of original material. The New Mexico Museum of Art has received a quote from All Right Construction of Albuquerque to be the general contractor on this project. They have completed a variety of projects for the National Park Service, including historic restoration of the White Sands National Park Visitor Center, and Sam Romero, the project superintendent for All Right, has completed restoration work at Bandelier National Monument. On the front south-facing portion of the building, the existing deteriorating square beam corbels and the round angle viga ends will be removed and replaced with new matching materials as needed, and the faux viga ends that are in good condition will be restored. On the east balcony, which overlooks the plaza, the beams will be refurbished and refinished, as well as the corbels. The area around the front main entrance of the building will be restuccoed, so the area that's in brown on the image. Stucco patching and blending with the existing color and texture will be done around all replaced vigas and beams. The railing on the balcony above the entrance to St. Francis Auditorium will be refurbished, and the upright balusters are to be refinished and reinstalled. That's an image of the balcony above the entrance to St. Francis. The existing sheathing of floor on the balcony is historically inappropriate. A new flooring and waterproofing detail will be installed that allows adequate drainage of rain and melted snow. The upper and lower beams of the balcony will be refurbished and refinished. On the east balcony and the northeast balcony, angle-cut faux vigas will be removed and restored or replaced with new matching vigas as needed, and the stucco will be patched and blended around all replaced vigas and beams. Latias under overhang will be restored and replaced with matching materials as needed. On the northwest corner of the exterior of St. Francis Auditorium, we will restore the wood structural beam that extends from the exterior into the building and remove and replace if needed with new matching beams. The stucco will be patched and blended around all replaced viga and beams. These repairs will address life and safety concerns, such as the failing viga ends on the exterior of the building and the rotting floorboard on the balcony outside St. Francis. It will also enhance the appearance and preservation of a beloved Santa Fe iconic building through this restoration project.
And I'd like to thank Shannon and the Museum of New Mexico for partnering with us and coming to make this presentation. It's a very important building, and I want to ensure that the board knew about the treatments and the careful approach by the Museum of New Mexico.
Thank you very much, Heather, and thank you for your presentation. When is the work supposed to start, and how long do you anticipate it going on?
We anticipate for it to start in the spring and for it to take several months, but some of this is dependent on, of course, once the work starts, for them to determine exactly how much deterioration is. The biggest thing are these beams that are outside St. Francis, which are in our loading dock. So you won't see the work happening from the plaza, which is nice, but we don't know how far the damage goes inside of them, of course. So hopefully it won't be as, that to take that long, but it could take, we can't predict exactly how long it'll take.
And just as a matter of information, this building is not made with adobe, correct?
Correct. It is a brick building.
Yeah, I think a lot of people within Santa Fe are under the impression that this is an adobe building, and
Yes.
it is not. It simulates it, but is not. Just in case any of you in this audience didn't know that. Member Benvenu, did you know that?
Yes, I did, but there was a very intense effort to use hand craftsmanship in the application of the stucco in order to achieve a handmade appearance, which was successful. So it can be done. So thank you for the presentation. I just have actually a question about a neighboring property. Do you have jurisdiction over the Edgar Lee Hewitt House on Lincoln, which is in a very sad state of disrepair?
That is part of the Department of Cultural Affairs, yes.
Can you address why nothing is happening with that and what could be done to address the same kind of issues on the Fine Arts Museum as on the Edgar Lee Hewitt House?
Absolutely. So that is part of the New Mexico Museum of Art does help to care for that building. But I'm actually going to turn it over to Michelle Gallagher Roberts, our Deputy Secretary, to answer that question because she's been involved with that project much longer.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Chair, member. So yes, actually, we are currently working with geotech survey on that building. There is some drainage issues. And so we are looking at, we have actually contractors and structural engineers working on it. Right now, we're in the study phase and determining how we can best preserve that building. So while I appreciate that it appears like we're not moving forward with the preservation of that building, we actually are doing a number of studies and working very closely with the New Mexico Historic Preservation Division on the proper care of that building.
Okay, that's good to hear. And just appearance wise, it's very shabby looking from the outside, what's been allowed to deteriorate. I don't think people realize what a significant building that is because of that, because it's just lost in the shadow of the Fine Arts Museum and because it's not being taken care of and hasn't been for so long, it really looks pathetic there. But as you probably know, that's historically, it's a significant building because Edgar Lee Hewitt used that as an example of what he thought the three styles of architecture should be for residential buildings, civic buildings, and museum buildings. And all three of them are catty-cornered to each other. So that's the example of a residential building. And he was involved in that renovation or that change in appearance. The Fine Arts Museum, of course, an example of a museum, and then the Palace of the Governors for a civic building. So that complex should really be brought forward, I think, as a historical, as a way to understand the history of how Santa Fe style developed in this city. And that just needs to be done with that building to really, because the other two are in quite good condition. So I would encourage that, and I appreciate your thoughts.
Madam Chair, member, we agree. And that is why we're taking a very careful approach. It is also one of the last remaining officers' quarters from the Fort Marquis era. So we are very aware of its significance. We actually received a grant from the National Park Service, Heritage Preservation, to look into it. So this is a project that has been ongoing for a number of years, but we also want to make sure that we're preserving it from the foundation up because of Edgar Lee Hewitt's alteration of a Victorian into a Santa Fe style. It has caused significant impact on the foundation. And so we want to make sure that the steps that we are taking are prudent and long-lasting.
One last question. What will you plan to do with that building?
Madam Chair, member, it is a part of the New Mexico Museum of Art's larger complex, and I believe they are going to be using it for offices as well as conference rooms and educational spaces.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Member Bienvenue. Any other questions or comments, board members? It appears not. Staff, do you have anything further to report to us?
No.
And thank you both very, very much.
Oh, as with reference to staff communications, next hearing, we're going to be providing you with a list of projects that have occurred in the past year that have been completed, because before we know it, May 8th will be here, and that'll be the Historic Preservation Awards ceremony. So we will be looking for nominations from the board members, but to provide you with some information to review, we'll give that to you at the February 13th.
And that'll be in May.
In May is when the award ceremony takes place. And that's a partnership with the Historic Santa Fe Foundation as well as the Old Santa Fe Association for that effort. And then Frank has something, and then there is also another presentation on proposed grants that Nicole Thomas.
You want me to take this down? Or should I take this down?
No, that's not necessary. I wanted to bring to, Madam Chair, I wanted to bring to the board's attention that after Ms. McSherry and I believe other city officials viewed the YouTube recording of the debate last meeting, January 9th, about the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, it was brought to my attention that that with respect to the dialogue that took place after the vote approving that project, there was considerable dialogue, and there was a critique of the planners the planner who presented that, and about the mission and role of the city planning historic preservation division. It was brought to my attention that Robert's Rules of Order discourages speaking adversely on a prior action not pending. That is 43:24, which reads, in debate, a member cannot reflect adversely on any prior act of the society that is not then pending, unless a motion to reconsider, rescind, or amend it is pending, or unless he intends to conclude his remarks by making or giving notice of one of these motions. Further, 43:20 reads, in debate, a member's remarks must be germane to the question before the assembly. That is, the statements must have a bearing on whether the immediately pending motion should be adopted. There is another provision, 4:30, which reads, debate must be confined to the merits of the pending question. Speakers must address their remarks to the chair, maintain a courteous tone, and especially in reference to any divergence of opinion, avoid interjecting a personal note into debate. So essentially, this follows a general rule, Madam Chair, that when the vote takes place, the debate ends, and we move on to the next agenda item. And to interject a dialogue in between the vote on one agenda item and the next agenda item is essentially a modification of the agenda, which has not been approved. And if that is taking place in future H-Board meetings, I'll have to ask the board chair to rule that out of order and move on to the next agenda item. And that would then be your discretion whether to enforce that rule. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Rubalit, for bringing that to our attention, and I will adhere to that in the future. Thank you. Nicole, I think you have the mic.
Good evening, Madam Chair and board members. Most of you know me. I think Mr. Valdo and Ms. Mather, this is your first time seeing me.
Is that mic on? We can barely hear you.
Oh, let me speak louder. Sorry. I think I'm loud and I'm not. Pleased to meet both of you in person, and I'm happy to give this brief presentation on some of the grants that the city has been working on, not just the Historic Preservation Division, but also city facilities. So we have a grant that was just completed, which was for the Historic Santa Fe Foundation Digital App Phase 1 grant. And what the Historic Santa Fe Foundation is doing is creating a walking tour app of all of the properties that they have listed. And the app is both in English and Spanish. And there'll also be an audio option for that too. So phase one of that, the city helped them with a certified local government grant. In progress, we have the main library historic structure evaluation, which is a city facilities project. And the structure evaluation is being done by Woven, which is Barbara Felix's architecture firm that she's renamed. And they're looking at what kinds of repairs need to be done, doing a historic window and door evaluation, looking at all the structures of the building. And that will be complete at the end of June. And then we have another certified local government grant that's in progress, partnering again with the Historic Santa Fe Foundation. They've started an endangered properties program, and the city of Santa Fe is supporting them with looking for endangered properties. And there's criteria specific to what these endangered properties are. They must be owned and lived in by a local family. And the intention is to help restore stucco, roof, and other things that are basic maintenance and repair. And so they're just kicking off this program, and we're going to help them kind of get it rolling. And then we have a few future grants. The state just reinstated the Cultural Properties Restoration Grants Fund. And this fund is $1 million each year dedicated to preservation projects across New Mexico. And they range from $5,000 to $250,000. And so we have 3 that the city is going to apply for. One of them is a continued city facilities project for the main library to look at some of the other things that may need to happen, pay for the design and the initial construction documents for actual restoration of that building and preservation of the building. We are also going to put in a grant application to look at and record the architecture of Philippe Register at the College of Santa Fe, those buildings. And then we're going to do another one that is focused on the historic downtown to create a review and context, look at historic fabric. And this grant is intended to lend information and breadth to the general plan as it goes forward, and to a redo of the NRHP form for the Santa Fe Historic District. So that's what we have going on. Pretty busy with the grants.
Thank you very much, Nicole, for informing us. Board members, do any of you have any questions or do you have comments? It appears not. And thanks again, Nicole, and it's nice seeing you again. Anything further under staff communications?
Rios, I'd also like to just let you know, Karen Gross has been a great support. She's with our Public Works Department and has, is managing the public library project, but also has been working with Nicole on the Sheridan Bus Depot project and the design, as well as the overall archaeological review and all of the streetscape and historic review of that particular streetscape on Sheridan. So many thanks to Karen Gross for helping support our efforts.
Thank you. If there's nothing further under staff communications, there is nothing under old business, but we have 7 cases under new business, and we'll move on to the first case. I do want to tell you that if you are from the public and you're going to comment on a case, I will limit you to 2 minutes. And Melissa, if you will help me with that, and you'll hear a bell ringing or something, or somebody will pull your leg or hit you over the head or something of that sort to alert you that your 2 minutes are up. Also, as you heard this evening, in reference to appeals, if anyone can appeal a case, whether you're involved in the case or not, or if you have interest in a case. And you can do that up to 15 days after the findings and conclusions have been approved. With that being said, we'll move to the first case, which is located at 145 Washington Avenue. Is the applicant here? And the applicant is here. It's Nicole. Yes, Nicole.
Shall I make a staff report, Chair Rios?
Sure.
One moment. Right. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to review the status of the library as well as, which currently has a contributing designation, as well as to designate primary facades. Let me share my screen. So the graphic that you see here is one of the original drawings that were done by John Galmeen prior to the construction of the current version of the library, or portion of the current version of the library in 1937. The library itself was at that time housed in a building down the street. So you'll see in my presentation that this building has evolved over time significantly. So as to the historic development of the site, back in 1921, you can see on the graphic on the left, there was a small city hall and fire department building that was located there at the intersection of Washington and Marcy on that south east corner. And it was determined that that was not going to be large enough to accommodate City Hall. Plus, there was also a desire to construct a fire department or provide for expanded use as well as police department. So the city was growing and there was an opportunity to apply for funding through the Public Works Administration, the New Deal projects, and the building was designed and built and opened in 1937. So the project was phased. You can see on the 1930 Sanborn at the right, the fire department was a little bit detached from the rest of the building. The police department was behind the fire department, and then the administrative functions of City Hall and where the city council chambers are on the northern portion of the building area located here. So the functions as they changed over time included the initial function of City Hall, Police Department, and Fire Department. And you can see on this historic graphic that the fire department doors were there and facing Washington Avenue. Right now, they've been, they're glass doors and really still do communicate that original function. And then at the rear was where the police department and the jail and everything was. And then, of course, there were the civic functions held on the northern portion of the building. In 1978, City Hall moved to this building, and the building itself was repurposed and became an expanded police department as well as a jail. The jail functions were expanded. And so it was named at that time the Joseph Berardinelli Municipal Court Building. And then that was pretty short-lived, and it became the main library after renovation in 1985 and 86. So that middle portion of the building is actually not historic. And here's a graphic illustrating, or a picture illustrating the demolition of that sort of middle portion of the building back in the 1980s. So you can see the original where the Southwest Reading Room is, the original sort of City Hall function on the right-hand side of the photograph, and then where the fire department used to be on the left-hand side of the photograph. So in the graphic here, you can, large portion of the building actually dates to the 1980s. And then the original pieces of the building that were designed by John Gomim are in green on that graphic. So staff's recommendation is that while the building has changed over time, a lot of its integrity remains. So staff recommends that the contributing status be retained. A contributing structure is a structure in a historic district approximately 50 years old or older that establishes and maintains the character of that district. And although the contributing structure is not unique in of itself, it adds to historic associations or historic architectural design qualities that are significant for the district. And the contributing structure may have had alterations, but the integrity remains. And staff's recommendation is the following for the primary facades. So as I've gone over, there's two different major phases of construction, and the recommended primary facades are in association with the 1937 building. And so, as you can see, there's numbers around this graphic. And so it would be numbers 1 and 2, where the fire department was, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, which are in association with that other portion of the building that was designed by John Gomim. And that concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you very much, Heather. That's so interesting. Board members, do you have any questions or clarification questions at this time? It appears not. Nicole, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is coming forward now because we're in the process of doing the historic structures report. And then we want to apply for this grant to help with the design and construction plans and need to know what will be preserved on the building and what kind of application we'll be bringing forward to the board at the time that the design is settled. So we're asking for the primary facade designations.
Any questions for Nicole? Member Benvenu.
Madam Chair, hi, Nicole. So what do you think about facade 3? You know, this is an interesting kind of conundrum here because I was surprised that that entire, but facade 3 being the portals and the main entry.
So the portals in the main entry, will you pull up the primary?
And I understand from staff's presentation in the HDRB that that is actually a new structure dating back to 85 or something.
It is.
Which is surprising because if you look at it, it looks exactly like the old postcards of the city hall.
They did do a reconstruction of that elevation or that facade
Right.
on the building, and they did work to mimic the style. One of the things that came up in our discussions about this project was, you know, how original was that design for the deck upstairs and what the railing looks like and things like that.
Well, even the railing, it shows on Meme's original drawings,
And
that
so,
distinctive X shape.
yeah.
It doesn't seem to go across the entire portal, but that is the detailing that he drew.
Yeah, and that entire piece that's in the brown was removed, and those two 1937 portions of the building that remain were completely separated from each other at the time that the construction was going on. So looking forward to the design, the intent is to kind of repair that. However, it's not technically 50 years or older, and so it wasn't recommended as contributing, or I mean.
Well, that's the conundrum part I was mentioning because it's, you know, the standard's a little different for contributing versus primary. Strangely, I guess you could consider them related. We're already saying it's contributing, even though parts of it aren't 50 years old.
Correct.
So that's, well, I guess it is now. We're going to revisit that issue, but if we decide to maintain that status, we'll be designating as contributing parts of the building that aren't 50 years old.
So the building, creating a contributing status for a building is about the building itself and stating that it has enough historic integrity to contribute to the district. The primary facades are the locations where preservation is actually to be applied. Because it retains historic material. And in those 1937 portions, especially on the north side, all of the rhythm of the windows, that portal, those are all intact. The 1937 that's on the southwest side has a few more modifications, but still retains a significant amount of integrity. So the preservation would occur because of that historic material. Number 3 doesn't retain any historic material because it was removed in the 1980s. However, when it comes forward for the design review, certainly the board can say, we want to retain this design and or reject any modifications that might come, but I don't expect that there will be any.
Right. Yeah, I guess I don't have the primary facade definition in front of me. I didn't think it specified historic material so much as the elevation that had the character defining traits, but that may be a distinction without a difference. It just seems to me that this is an interesting problem because even though it's not historic material, it does conform to the original design. It is, I mean, anyone looking at this would say that's an incredibly important feature of why this building contributes to the historic streetscape, even though it's not 50 years old. So, but it sounds like you're in agreement with staff that 3 should be not designated as primary facade.
Yeah, in my experience, it's really the primary elevations are for protecting historic material and architectural features.
Okay, more than the design aspect. And what about it seems like this was painted recently. Is there any intent to restucco it?
So there's been a discussion about that, and right now the pricing for restuccoing is being evaluated. There's some benefits to potentially restuccoing, removing. It's very costly, is one thing. The other is that there's a question about the fragility of the walls. And removing the stucco can be really very intense for the actual material. And so once the report is complete, and that'll come before the board so that you all can look at it, there will be these evaluations of different approaches to restoring the exterior and trying to find which is the best solution for the building. So
was it paint already on the building before it was just recently repainted?
many colors of paint.
Yeah, I know they were all different colors. So I assumed they weren't stucco. That was all different paints.
It was all different paints. And
Okay.
so one of the goals, there was also painting of the trim and other wood elements around the windows and stuff like that.
Right.
Just to stabilize the building in order to,
Well, it looks better.
does-
A
it
lot
does.
better, actually.
yeah, it looks pretty good. It's a neat building.
Yeah, it's a beautiful building. Okay, thank you.
Member Benvenu. So Nicole, originally this building was stuccoed as opposed to being painted, correct?
That is correct. And in the structures report, they're also looking for the color of stucco that MEM intended it to be, just to get a sense of what the color used to be. So,
Members of the board, other questions or comments? No? Anyone from the public or on Zoom wishing to comment, please come forward now. I see John Eddie's coming forward.
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please state your name and address for the record.
John, I don't think that's on.
Ms. Thomas did a really wonderful report. I really appreciate it. The city is very lucky to have her on board. I'm curious about what Board Member Bienvenu brought up. And I personally feel that the facade number 3 does contribute considerably to the continuity of that entire building. Certainly the west-facing facade, the north-facing, and a little bit of the east-facing facade. So I'm curious, it is a bit of a conundrum. I think that I assume that the board has a fair amount of discretion when it comes to massaging the line of pushing part of a building towards contributing if it hasn't met the 50-year mark. And so I was wondering if there was a question that needed to be directed to the legal department to see where you guys stand, exactly what your authority is there, and create some wiggle room, or not wiggle room, but comfort zone. If the board does see fit that pushing that facade into contributing as well might be appropriate, as I see it that way. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, John. Anyone else in this building wishing to comment on this particular project? No one? Anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Chair Rios. First is, I believe, if I say the wrong thing, Sydney E. You can correct me, but you may unmute. And please state your name and address for the record and be ready to be sworn.
Yes, actually, I had raised my hand to speak on behalf of a further agenda item, so I don't want to speak on this particular one. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. Just raise your hand when you're ready for that particular item. Thank you. And the next one is Stephanie Beninato. Stephanie, please state your name and address for the record and be sworn.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Stephanie Beninato, PO Box 1601, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I remember this building because in 1975, I worked for the public defender, and the city jail was on the second floor, kind of on the south side of the south half of that building. And I would have to go there to interview prisoners. And at one point, I was even participated in a magistrate court hearing that takes place in what is now the Southwest Reading Room. So to me, it's a very it's a beloved building, and I think it's beloved by many people in Santa Fe. So I'm happy that there's an effort to preserve it. I think it's rather ironic, however, that the city doesn't restucco it, but painted it. So I hope that in this renovation, it will be restuccoed. I do like Nicole's explanation of the difference between contributing and primary. Although I do see the conundrum of the number 3 facade and that it does contribute to the building. And so I'm not sure about that. And I wonder in 1985 what kind of approval the city historic board gave. Because again, you allow things to be changed on primary facades sometimes. So what does that mean for that primary facade? Now, we know so many years later, would it mean that, well, hey, it's not really the same, and it changed in this year, and even though we approved it, somehow we're not going to make it a primary facade. So I just maybe would ask that you have a little more discussion about that. I noticed on the presentation there was 6 repeated twice. I think it meant 6 and 7 in terms of the numbers, the facade numbers. And I would ask that that part of the 1937 fire station building, number 12, that facade, that also be included as a primary facade. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Nicole, on facade number 3, did you say that was designed by John Gummy?
It is reconstructed in the design of the.
Of John Gummy?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So, Member Benvenu, you were asking about primary facades, and primary facades are those that have character defining features, and they also might have an association to someone that is recognized or that is important in the community. So I think that it's important that we, in my view, that we do retain that we make number 3, even though it is not 50 years old, that we consider making that a primary facade. I will hear from the rest of the board to see what people think.
Arias?
Member Guida. Yes.
I'm sorry, there's one other member of the public that would like to speak.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
John Murphy has raised his hand. John, you may unmute and speak. Please state your name and address and also be prepared to be sworn.
Yes, my name is John Murphy at 2833 Plaza Verde, Santa Fe.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I would just like to comment on the issue of facade number 3. I understand sort of the need to make it a primary facade, excuse me, but it is clearly changed and there's been new fenestration introduced that was not there prior to 1985. So that second floor balcony has a number of new windows and doors that was not there. So I think that would be unfair to the practice that you apply to all other cases to say all of a sudden that this one, which has completely new fenestration pattern, is indeed contributing and a primary facade. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for your comments.
Madam-
Member Guida, anyone else? Let me just ask, anyone else wishing to comment?
Chair Rios, no, thank you.
Thank you. And Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate this discussion about facade number 3. Nicole, I also appreciate your discussion of historic materials associated with the historic portions of the building and where this is going. And I just, I'm always interested in a lot more rigor being applied in our very peculiar way of statusing buildings in Santa Fe. And I think some of what Nicole was describing really spoke to that on a preservation front. There's 2 things here. There is the status of the building and there is the primary facade designation. Primary facades don't convey, associations with an individual. We may convey those associations or recognize those associations with the status of the building as a whole. The issue here, and what I'm assuming from the presentation, is that staff has said that the alterations to this building, the 1980s portion, the unfaithful reconstruction of this middle portion that we're calling facade 3, does not diminish the integrity or the lasting contribution of the remaining historic portions. And so that's why we're even considering contributing status for this building, is that because the alterations to a historic building are not such that they have diminished the status to non-contributing of the structure overall. So in conveying or designating a contributing status to the building as a whole, it's recognizing that it hasn't been ruined by this false reconstruction. I agree with John Murphy that that this would be a departure then from practice to say that this kind of fictional not completely faithful reconstruction that is facade 3 is somehow a primary facade. There's the slight nuance of all of this too, that that we've suddenly gone to articulating each and every little in and out as a separate facade. Had we pursued precedent that was set before, where we just said, well, north, east, south, west, we would simply say the Washington facing facade of the building is the primary facade, and we acknowledge that the center portion is non-historic. So those are some of the nuances that I see in the discussion, but I would like to remain clear that when we are designating a building as contributing, non-contributing, significant. We are recognizing its contribution to the downtown and East Side Historic District as it's defined in the National Register nomination overall, and that the facade designation is an additional thing that we put on this to recognize and to protect the character defining elements and character defining features that provide that that provide the integrity and the ability to make that designation as contributing. I would be supportive of staff's recommendations, therefore.
Madam Chair. Just to clarify, so in this case, it's not even just the historic character, but it's also material that's under consideration. And then Mr. Murphy made an excellent point, which is that the fenestration has changed on those facades. I think that what Member Bienvenue was cueing in on was that portal and the deck and the railing design, and the fact that, you know, all of that kind of remains in the same configuration and those types of things. It may be helpful, Madam Chair, to have staff read the definition for primary and possibly facade as well, because that is a defined term. And so those facades are defined based on dimension.
Yes, Gary.
Chair Rios and members of the board, facade, primary facade definition is one or more principal faces or elevations of a building with features that define the characters of the building's architecture.
And I think that even if facade number 3 would not be designated as primary, I think that it would be honored and not changed. I think that in the future, I think people would see that it contributes to the rest of the building, and I think that they would leave it alone. Yes, Member Beachside.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with this discussion about facade number 3, and I think according to the HDRB report, it seems like the U-shaped configuration is particularly important for an accessible, sort of friendly, public-facing building that is not too imposing, but invites people in. And I think by preserving the facades that are recommended by staff, that configuration is protected. I wanted to just ask about facade number 12. There is a historic portion of that. Did you consider that, and how should we think about that western portion of the south facade?
Thank you, Member Beachside. Yes, there was a consideration of that, and this goes back to the definition of how a facade is defined, and there's no break in that plane, and so ultimately that portion of the building is disrupted by this 1980s addition to it, and for that reason it wasn't recommended.
Thank you.
Member Bienvenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it's been an interesting discussion. I'm glad we had it. So the primary facade definition does just refer to the features that define the character of the building's architecture, not whether it's historic or not. However, I do think it's implied, because the only reason you're designating a primary facade is because you already have a historic building. Otherwise, you wouldn't be designating a primary facade. So I think that even though it's not spelled out that it needs to be historic to be primary, I think that's a very reasonable interpretation, that it's implicit in the term, because as long as we're requiring contributing to be historic. The only reason this has become kind of an interesting issue is because we're designating something contributing that's not completely historic, and we're not necessarily removing those aspects from that designation. So that's what I think has created a little bit of an issue. But I'm comfortable with the idea that number 3 is not primary, based on the implicit understanding that it's been reconstructed rather than being historical. And in addition, as has been pointed out, and as is clear from the drawings and the photographs, there are some distinctions between the original drawings by Meme and what was reconstructed. So I think it's fair to say that, well, I agree with both the applicant and staff on number 3.
Nicole, in reference to the outdoor area of the main entrance, will they be doing anything there? I noticed that I think that they have fake grass. They have, I think, and it looks like it needs a little bit of TLC.
So as part of the structures report, the exterior of the building, including the landscaping and the hardscaping, have all been evaluated as well, or they will be evaluated. In the future phase, they will be addressed. Currently, they're being looked at. So everything from whether or not the trees need to be trimmed, how drainage is affecting the building, just general maintenance of the surrounding areas of the building. Those are all discussed in the structures report, because all of those things contribute to the integrity of the building overall.
Thank you, Nicole. With all this being said, I will entertain a motion if nothing further is, yes.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion, case 2024-007-741, HDRB 145 Washington Avenue. I move that the board maintain the contributing status of the building and designate facades number 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 as primary for staff's recommendation.
And do I hear a second?
Each I have a second.
Anything further to add? Nothing further? Roll call vote, please.
Member Guida,
Yes.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Valdo,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Beachide,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Nicole.
Thank you.
Next case is located at 435 Calle La Paz. Is that applicant here? And the applicant is here, and this is Lanny's case. Lanny?
Technology's caught up with us now. Good evening, Madam Chair and board members. This is case 2023-7677 HDRB for 435 Calle La Paz for a status review and primary facade designation. 435 Calle La Paz is located south of Acequia Madre Elementary on the east side of Calle La Paz and west of Camino Manzano. All of these properties actually have 2 street frontages. The property at 435 Calle La Paz is a single family residence listed as contributing to the downtown and east side historic district. The residence is currently 1,927 square feet with a 1930s original portion and a 680 square foot 1969 addition. These are the street frontage views of the residence. The original portion of the structure is the middle portion of the upper photo, and the 1969 addition shows on the right of the top photo and the left of the lower photo. The residence is constructed of adobe, hollow clay tile, and frame. The frame is the 1969 addition. It has deteriorated stucco brocade finish. The residence has 2 main entrances. There is one at the northwest corner and one on the south facade of the original building. The entrance on the south opens to a gravel yard and is graced with a well-proportioned portal. The entrance on the northwest corner is stuck behind the garage and was created as part of the 1969 addition work, as there previously were windows in that facade. All windows are aluminum slider windows installed as part of the 1969 addition construction. The 1969 addition resulted in significant changes to the older home. These involved across the exterior, replacing all the older wood multi-light sash windows with aluminum sliding units. The change of the windows resulted in a new fenestration added to the east elevation, removing the front door and shifting it to another location. In addition, several rooms in the older adobe portion were reworked and a bump out closet was removed. The entire house was covered with brocade stucco, which was popular at the time. The north elevation on the eastern end sits within a few feet of the property line, which is located at the gray yard wall in the lower photo on the right. And if you look further into the photo, you can see that the north facade of the garage in the background is also extremely close to the property line. The original portion of the residential structure's northern facade, known as facade 1, holds the chimney. The eastern elevation along Camino Manzano has surface windows in the 1969 addition and deep recess windows in the older portion of the structure. Positioned near the northwest corner of the lot and facing west stands a deteriorated 288 square foot adobe one-car garage. The garage is about 38 inches from the north property wall. It has a modern metal overhead door, which was installed as part of the 1969 remodel, a brick cornice with a header row lock stretcher header pattern crowning the roof. There are remnants that suggest a Viga framework, and an old wood panel door provides pedestrian entrance on the south facade. A concrete floor and plaster to the walls were added in the 2000s. The site plan shows how the buildings are tightly located at the northern section of the property with the open space and gardens to the south of the home. Looking at the floor plan, you can see that the living and dining areas are the defining line of the original structure. The office and bedroom on the south or right are the frame structure from 1969. Staff did approve the replacement of the door on the east elevation, which was heavily damaged, and the fence along the east property line in 2023 to secure the property. The west elevation shows the second entrance to the house that is obscured by the garage on the left here. Staff also approved the covering of the missing window on the east garage wall and a means to stabilize the wall while the applicant gets approval for repairs. Currently, the applicant is requesting primary facade designation for the residential structure, which is currently statused as contributing, and a status review with primary facade designation, if applicable, for the garage structure. Staff recommends the primary facade of the residential structure be the south facade of the 1939 structure, or facade 9, including the portal, due to it being an unaltered portion of the original historic structure with architectural features such as the boxed beams with a tongue and groove ceiling, and that the garage structure be designated as contributing with the west street-facing facade, or facade G4, as primary based on the proof of the Viga framework, brick cornice on the roof, and adobe structure. Per section 14-5.2C designation of significant and contributing structures. Stand for questions.
Questions, board members, at this time? Yes, Member Aguilar-Madrona.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lonnie, the HDRB, I think, states that the window, well, for sure that the windows are aluminum and are non-historic. Would your recommendation exclude those from the primary facade if number 9 is chosen?
Yes.
And is the door also non-historic? The HDRB just said it's wood, but I don't think it said anything further.
I doubt it's historic. I'm sure it was replaced with the 1969, but we didn't have any proof of that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone? No other questions? Anyone in the audience wishing to comment on this particular project? Oh, but before, I better hear from the applicant. Sorry, applicant, I apologize.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Richard Martinez, Martinez Architecture Studio, PO Box 925, Santa Fe, New Mexico. Hello.
Hi, Richard.
Hi. There was a great history by John Murphy. I hope you were able to read that. The house was built in the late 1930s as a rental, and it was bought by the Moyas in 1960, and they added to it. And the Moyas owned the house for 65 years. And so it was really a great history. As you may have seen in the photographs, the house needs all new windows. The historian, John Murphy, wrote, the addition resulted in significant changes to the older home. These involved, across the exterior, replacing all the older wood multi-light sash windows with aluminum sliding units. The change of windows resulted in new fenestration added to the east elevation, removing the front door and shifting it to another location. In addition, several rooms in the older adobe portion were reworked, and a bump-out closet was removed, and the entire house was covered with brocade stucco, which was popular at the time. So the door is historic. It was just moved from the place where it was before to where it is now. The door is kind of interesting. It's an old board door with the bolts still protruding through the door into the interior of the house. But as you saw, all the windows had been replaced, and we're hoping that the windows can be excluded because we want to replace all the windows. The status recommendation by the historian is, and I quote, "The recommendation is to maintain contributing status, suggesting the south facade of the original house holding the portal be designated as the primary facade. The other elevations are of less interest or represent the late 1960s makeover of the home. The garage is recommended for an upgraded contributing status, suggesting the west elevation as the primary facade." And we agree with all that, but if you notice, the historian does not recommend the portal itself as primary. He mentions the portal, and could have recommended it, but instead he only recommends the facade of the house that holds this portal. There's a reason for this. The portal needs significant work. The concrete floor is cracked significantly. The facade beam that was used for that entry portal is poorly designed. It sticks out of the wall. It's exposed to the elements, and it's rotting, and it needs to be replaced. The ceiling is failing. The box beams hide the 2x4s that the ceiling is actually built of, and there's plaster on the ends of that ceiling, and the plaster has fallen away and is not it's not stable. The historian recognizes these problems with the construction, and the portal itself does not contribute to the streetscape. I agree with the designation of the house as contributing and with the garage as contributing, and agree with the recommendation of the west facade of the garage and the entry facade of the house as primary. but I would like the designation to exclude the non-historic windows and to exclude the portal, which also needs significant work. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. But the portal is original to the house, to the old portion of the 1930s.
Yes, like many of the other portions of the house, it is original.
So also, and I guess this question goes more to Lanny. There is a metal fence on that property, and that was not being addressed this evening. Is that correct?
No, we didn't include that.
That is not being addressed? Okay. That should be addressed at some time, I think. Because those fences were very, that's a fence that was very appropriate and used during that time. You see that in those old houses. And this house is actually like an anomaly in that neighborhood with that brocade plaster job, and it definitely sticks out. It's whether it's, you know, it's a reflection of its time.
I think we've determined, though, that you guys can still status the fences without that actually having been posted as part of the property. But unfortunately, I don't happen to have a photo of it to share with everyone.
Is that accurate that we could, if it's not posted, can we, Heather? Can we actually act on that?
Chair Rios, I might have Frank help out a little bit with this one, but there was no status review as part of this application. And if that's correct, I'm sorry, there's no status review. It's the area of construction, or
No, the fence has not been addressed as part of
as
this
part of the
case,
status review.
But
In the past, there have been, for instance, on a project off of Camino Cabra, there has been a desire to status a retaining wall that was status at the hearing. It is all part of that same property. So I believe that the H board can designate it as part of that status, if that's the pleasure of the board.
Thank you, Heather.
I
Yes,
would like to
Richard.
address this if I can. We are going to address this fence, but the fence itself it's in poor condition, and it is not available to replace, and so we will address this fence and how we restore or replace it, but to give a status to this fence itself because of its terrible state is not appropriate. We will do something that's appropriate for this house and for the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Questions for the applicant, board members, at this time? Yes, Member Aguilar Medrano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple clarifications. When I first read staff's recommendation, they included the portal and they called out certain architectural features such as the tongue and groove under the portal. But then the HDRB, I believe he refers to the tongue and groove as a modern addition. So Richard, can you give some clarification, particularly like on the tongue and groove? Is that original or is that a more modern renovation?
It may have, there may have been some tongue and groove there originally, but it's hiding modern framing behind it. And so I don't know whether it is original historic material, but there is historic material behind it.
Okay. And then thank you for answering the question about the door. Is the screen, is that historic or non-historic?
The screen is not historic.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, board members? If not, I'll open it for public comment. Anyone from the public wishing to comment? No one here? What about on Zoom?
Yes, Chair Rios, Stephanie Beninato would like to speak, who has been previously sworn.
Excuse me, Stephanie Beninato. I just have to remind you all that 1969 edition is actually historic. It is more than 50 years old. I think it does try to fit into the original historic character, although the windows obviously are of that era. And so I think it depends on which era you want to have the house restored to. So if you want the earlier era, then you're going to allow the windows to be considered non-historic or an exception to the primary facade that can be replaced. And at some point, I guess you'll have to say that these sliding windows, these steel windows are historic, and that at some point they deserve to be preserved. I'm not sure about this particular structure, whether that's the case or not. And I'm happy, and I also feel like that just because something is needs repair, that it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be considered primary and just in need of repair as things are over time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? I will entertain a motion from the board. Yes, Member Bichai.
I'll make a motion. In case number 2023-007677 HDRB at 435 Calle La Paz, I move to retain the contributing status for the main house, designating the south facade as primary, excluding the portal, and designating the garage as contributing with the primary facade on the west, G4. And also I'll just note for the record that the HDRB refers to the metal fencing and describes the woven wire structure at the west as vintage, though it does not rise to the contributing status. And so for that reason, I'm not designating the wire fencing.
There's a second to this motion.
I'll second. Guido will second with a possible friendly amendment to also exclude the windows from the primary facade designation of the house, and to exclude, I think, the garage door from the designation of the west facade of the garage.
Yes, thank you. Accepted as friendly.
Is there anything further to add? Nothing further. Roll call vote, please.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Baldo,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
I'm gonna vote no. I agree with excluding the windows and the screen, but not the portal.
Member Beachide,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
No, I also don't agree on the portal.
and Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Thank you all. Next case is located at 365 Garcia Street, and the agent is also Richard Martinez, and this is Ramon's case. Ramon, may we hear from you?
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. This is case number 2023-007722, HDRB for status review and primary facade designations. The property is located on the east side of Garcia Street between Paseo de Peralta to the west and Acequia Madre to the south, and Delgado Street to the east. It's shown here outlined in red. The house is intimately connected to an older home on the adjoining property to the north. It began as an extension to the older house, probably in the 1930s, and then came into its owned in the 1950s, taking on its current footprint after 1978. While now its own house with a separate address, they still share a interior wall. This diagram is from the HDRB, shows the presumed evolution of a property. The existing floor plan and site plan. A street view showing the adjoining properties. 363 is on the left and 365 is on the right. This is a photo of the west elevation facing Garcia Street. The south elevation, portion of the south elevation, showing the kitchen area at the right. The south elevation showing the non-historic extension. The east elevation, which is pretty much inaccessible and not visible from the streetscape. This is what I'm proposing for primary facades, which would be F1, F2, and the proposed contributing site wall to the south of the site. This is following John Murphy's HDRB recommendations. Staff recommends that the historic status of the structure be maintained as contributing per 14-5.2C, designation of significant and contributing structures, and 14-5.2E, downtown and east side design standards. Staff further recommends that facades F1 and F2 as identified in the previous facade diagram be designated as primary and the south wall be designated as contributing. With that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Ramon. Any questions for Ramon, board members? It appears no questions at this time. Richard?
Madam Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, yes.
Mr. Saracen, could you please, what case number do you have for this?
Two 2023007720-HDRB.
Okay, thank you very much.
Richard?
Thank you. I would like the owners on Zoom, would like her to be able to speak first.
She needs to get sworn in.
Yes, Missy, if you could state your name and address for the record and then be sworn.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. My name is Sydney I, and I live at 7317 Southeast 35th Avenue in Portland, Oregon.
Thank you. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Madam Chair and members of the Historic Board, thank you so much for allowing me to speak to you from Portland, Oregon, on behalf of my family about this special adobe house at 365 Garcia and what it means to us. My family is from Tucson, and although my father worked briefly as a pediatrician in Los Alamos, we spent many summers driving over from Tucson to spend time in New Mexico. In 1986, my parents, John and Susan I, bought this home on their 25th wedding anniversary. They're still married. And my husband and I actually went there and honeymooned, and we've since enjoyed many family trips to this beautiful home and location. When my parents relocated from the Southwest for some years, they rented the house out on a long-term basis, but have been very committed to keeping this house up for future generations to enjoy. This year, my husband and I have joined with my parents to work together and look after preserving this home for our family to enjoy on a more regular basis. Finally, I want to say that I live in a historic neighborhood in Portland, Oregon, and I am absolutely committed to honoring the beauty of this historic Santa Fe home and respecting the East Side neighborhood that it's located in. Thank you so much for letting me speak to you on this matter.
Thank you, Ms. Lai. And Richard, you have the floor.
Yes. So once again, a great history of the house by John Murphy. Who knew that the people who owned this house in the 60s made news in Santa Fe? I quote, the same year, the census recorded a small household living in the now separate home at 365 Garcia, including Anthony, 49, now going by Tony, who worked as a truck driver for the city, and Mary, 48, who was keeping house. Newspaper articles gave a sense of the couple's political affiliations and personalities. In a 1962 controversy over the proposed rezoning of a neighborhood market, Tony went after the Old Santa Fe Association, OSFA, who opposed it with nativist anger. In a letter to the editor published in the New Mexican, he complained about outsiders stealing our culture, leveling his anger at Johnny-come-latelys who now tell us how we must build our houses to cater to the tourist trade, curious to see the same houses which were built by our people. In a hearing on the same topic a year later, Mary chimed in, again going after outsiders and their undue influence. Of course, they both had valid concerns and would be horrified about how things turned out. In 1964, Tony, a Republican, ran unsuccessfully as for the county assessor. So it was quite interesting. The staff recommendation is that the staff recommends that the historic status of the structure be maintained as contributing, and further recommends that facades F1 and F2 identified in the attached facade diagram be designated as primary, and that the south site wall be designated as contributing. However, the windows in this house, again, are in bad shape. The historian wrote, the west elevation, once facing directly onto the street, now has a central opening holding a modern door flanked by tall windows. The blue wood frame windows are not original, but likely represent the casements that once stood in the slots. They sit back approximately 4 inches with an opening with angled reveals. They are placed low on a low sill at the same header height as the door. Oddly stepped walls channel the visitor to the front door. The door is modern and ornamented with leaded glass scene of a woman in a flowing white gown with her back turned towards the street. Above the entry is a tiled canopy, which is not historic. The door leads to a sizable, undivided room spanned with vigas. This room feels like a sala and may represent the first piece of construction. The south elevation facing the parking area and the side yard, the south elevation is the longest piece of the house. It soaks up solar heat and reveals the home's evolution through the changes in parapet heights and window depths. A set of wooden casements gives light to the sala or the living room. These, like others around the house, are not original. They sit about 8 inches from the wall, their sills close to the ground. The next piece, signaled by a drop in parapet height, is the kitchen. This room also has paired wood casements and is accessed from the outside by a faux plank door. The historian didn't recognize these windows as original because he was reacting to the modification which compromised the historic windows. The windows have been very much modified. Ray Patterson, the window assessor, reports his report states, in closing, my professional opinion is that windows A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and I are historic. However, the sashes have been modified with an additional piece of glass and stop. This modification makes the windows impossible to repair to a historic appearance. The sashes would have to be replaced. The jambs on the window are historic. However, the jambs also have rot and decay because of not being flashed properly, and the sills have been covered over with various restuccoing, allowing moisture into the walls. To fix the flashing issue, the jambs would need to be removed, and in my professional opinion, the jambs would be damaged beyond repair in the process of removal. It is of great importance to have proper window flashing to preserve the integrity of the walls. Both the sashes and the jambs should be replaced in like and in kind. I would like to make sure that the windows and doors are explicitly excluded from the designation of contributing of our primary facades. I'm also not in agreement with the idea that the south elevation in front of the kitchen is also designated as primary. Can I turn this on? If F1 and F2 are designated as primary, this house has no exterior, thank you, has no exterior, this house has no exterior portals or living spaces, spaces that define Santa Fe and the way that we live here. If the finding designates that the west facade, that the south facade along with the west facade is also designating, then there's no place that such a portal can be added to this house, because it is not possible to build on the north, the south, east, nor the west facades. Also, as you can see, this is a picture of the front of the kitchen facade on the south, showing the living room facade next to it, the higher part on that facade. Perhaps this area was originally a portal that was modified. The historian and his report only looks at aerial photographs, so he can tell that this area was roofed, but not what it was used for. The door to the kitchen, the door that you see in this photograph, is very short, approximately 6 feet 3 inches. This, it's a very short door, and the window is very close to the door. There's separated only by a wood column that is not in line with the wall above. As you can see, there's a little bit of crease where the column hits the facade. And the wall of the kitchen is not continuous with the wall of the living room. In other words, there's a seam between the two. The wall of the kitchen does not go into and is not continuous with the wall of the living room. I agree with the designation of the house as contributing with the primary facade of the west of the facing Garcia Street of the living room, and perhaps the south facade of the living room that's facing the yard, but not the kitchen. So I would like if the kitchen elevation were excluded from this designation, and the windows and doors being modern adaptations would be also excluded. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Board members, do you have questions for Richard at this time? Nothing. I will ask for public comment. Anyone in this room wishing to comment on this particular project? No one coming forward. Anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Chair Rios. Stephanie Beninata would like to speak, but before I permit her to talk, I would just like to share that in the late 1990s, I had the opportunity to live here. And for that, I'm grateful to the owners, and hopefully the red stove is still there.
Thanks, Heather.
And Stephanie, you may unmute.
Thank you. Stephanie Beninata. I know that you allow exceptions and additions to primary facades if they're maybe instead of a portal, perhaps like a pergola. And also you have allowed additions to primary facades when they can be removed without damaging the historic material. And so I find some of these arguments not really addressing what a primary facade is. And I hope that you kind of look at that as opposed to here's what we want to do and here's why we think you shouldn't allow it. And I appreciate that the windows have to be replaced, but I think the recommendation is to replace in kind. And I think therefore you could say that these are, that the parts of them are still historic, but the entire window opening has to be, or jam, etc., has to be replaced in kind. And I think that would also be appropriate and allow the owner to get what they want and also to hopefully preserve it based on a principle. I do like that the south wall will be preserved or be labeled as contributing. I do think you should preserve both of the facades. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom?
Chair Rios.
No one else. Ramon, would you reiterate the primary facades that you are recommending?
That would be the west facade F1 and the south facade F2.
Thank you. Board member, yes, Member Guida?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Richard, just to be clear, you're saying that, to kind of add information to John Murphy's report, that the windows in the west facade and the door are not historic material. And that on the south facade, at least the portion that we're considering designating, the two windows may be historic material, but they were repurposed historic materials. Is that correct?
Yeah, according to the window report, all the windows are historic, but they have been modified. The historian recognized them as not historic because they've been modified so much that I think it's difficult to see that they are the old windows because all you see is the new part of the windows. But Ray Patterson was able to see past that and see what the windows were made of.
Okay. And then Ramon, I understand John's recommendation, but what does the south facade really contribute to the understanding of the building's architecture as a contributing building of the district?
I think it represents the evolution of the building in general. So that kind of orients you as to the history and the expansion of what was the original building that's to the north.
But that would only be the entirety of the south facade, because that's subsequent additions, right? This would be the south facade, that the portion that we're talking about was built at the same time as the west facade, correct?
I don't know that for sure. I believe, along with Richard, that the parapet deviation that happens between the main room and the kitchen kind of indicates that those happened at different times.
Got it. Thank you.
Heather, did you have something?
Yes, thank you, Chair Rios. The portion of the building that is beyond the living room was built in the 1950s. You may recall that from the Higbee So that's part of the evolution of the building, just to clarify. But of course, in the 70s was when that sort of bump out was added for the second bedroom.
Thank you, Heather.
Heather, if you wouldn't mind pulling up the diagram that's on the slide.
IT, if you could show the computer from the atrium or from the podium. Not the Elmo, but the other one.
Can you check to make sure
PowerPoint?
it's plugged in?
The PowerPoint from the computer, please.
Yes, we're not getting any reading from the computer.
Let me pull it up from here. Just one moment. All right, here's the photograph of that south elevation. Do you want the primary facade diagram or?
The evolution of the building diagram, which is one of the first couple slides. There you go. Right.
Got it. And it seems to suggest that the green was all built at once. And accordingly, I think, my feeling is that, the west facade may suffice for at least for the building portion.
And I think staff would be in agreement that the portal and the windows couldn't be excluded from that primary designation.
If there are no further questions, Member Aguilar Medrano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John Murphy did recommend the south portion like you originally did, correct?
That is,
Okay,
Madam Chair and Member Aguilar Medrano, yes, that is correct.
Okay, and then my inclination on the windows, because it was found that there is historic material, although I would be fully supportive of a replacement, I'm just wondering if the correct avenue tonight is to not exclude them and then to have the applicant go after an exception in a future meeting. So that's my inclination at the moment, but curious what other board members think tonight.
Any comments, other board members, in reference to the windows? That is an avenue that can be taken. Member Guida.
What would the exception be to replace historic material? Are we convinced that the design of the windows is historic?
Heather. Excuse me, Aguilar Medrano. Yes, Heather.
Thank you, Chair Rios. So the windows, at this point, we don't know when they were replaced and put into the current configuration. So staff, that would be one question we wouldn't want to ask. But yes, historic material would be removed in that case.
And Member Aguilar Medrano, did you have something further?
I don't know that I have anything to add. I was just gonna reference back to the window report again and see if he said anything about the pattern. Is it your understanding that not even the pattern is historic? The divided light pattern?
That the windows have been manipulated. They
Mhm.
may be historic material, but they've been manipulated. And I guess what I would suggest is facade designation.
That was stated, the windows are historic, but they've been modified.
And facade designation and note that note this condition of the windows that they've some, like the door is not historic, the windows are historic material, but they are not necessarily in their historic configuration.
Yeah, so not exclude them, but just give that special notation. That would make sense.
Okay. Anything further, board members? If not, I will entertain a motion, please.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion.
Member Guida?
2023-007-720 HDRB 365 Garcia Street, downtown and Eastside Historic District. I move that the board retain the status of the structure as contributing and designate facade F1 as primary and the south site wall as contributing, noting that the door on facade F1 is non-historic and that the windows, although they may be historic material, have been altered from their original configuration.
Is there a second?
May there seconds.
And is there anything further to add? Yes, Member Aguilar Madron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could I propose a friendly amendment that the tile canopy also be excluded?
Yes.
Anything further? Roll call vote, please.
Member Valdo,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida,
Yes.
Member Mather.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next case is located at 1047A Camino San Nicasio. It appears the applicants are coming forward. And that is Ramon's case. Ramon, may we hear from you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I might need Heather's help to get the PowerPoint up.
Just one moment. Working on it.
I think you should share your screen.
Madam Chair and members of the board, this is case 2023-007721 HDRB 1047A Camino San Nicasio. It's a single-family residence in the downtown and east side historic district. The status is non-contributing. The owners request a two-story remodel addition of approximately 1,185 square feet on the south and west elevations to a height of 16 feet 9 inches, where the maximum allowable is 16 feet 9 inches. Camino San Nicasio is located south of Canyon Road and on the end of the and between Camino Cerrito to the east and Camino Don Miguel to the west. The property is outlined in red. This is the roundhouse or kind of street facing view. To the west, cameras facing northeast. This is an interior photograph of the roundhouse portion of the building. This is a photograph of the guest house portion of the structure. This building is difficult to image due to its site and unique plan. The scope of work is easier to define through the drawings. This is the existing site plan above and the proposed below. Can I have the next slide, please? The existing floor plan above and the proposed below. The roof plan above and the proposed addition below. Maybe you can back up one slide if you could, please. 2 slides. There we go. So you can see the addition, the main part of the addition is kind of like in the center of what the wrench-like formation of the footprint is. Trellises and other landscaping elements were included in the previous slide on showing the site plan. Okay. The existing north elevation above and the proposed below. You can go to the next one. The existing south elevation above and the proposed below. The existing west elevation above and the proposed below. The existing east elevation above and the proposed below. The proposed materials palette. Staff recommends approval of the proposed project and finds that the application complies with section 14-5.2D, general design standards for all historic districts, and 14-5.2E, downtown and east side design standards. With that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Ramon. This project is located, this building is located at the very end of San Nicasio at the dead end, correct?
That is correct.
And
Yes.
would you say that the public visibility of this project is minimal?
Madam Chair, yes, I would agree with that.
And is part of the proposal second story?
Yes, but I'll let the architect further define the scope of the work.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments at this time? Member Beachhead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ramon, was it an allowable height calculation performed for this project?
Yes, Madam Chair and Member Beachide, yes, it was.
Sorry, what is this within the allowable height?
It's exactly at the allowable height.
Thank you.
Member Aguilar-Petrón.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ramon, are the walls and fences allowed to exceed 6 feet?
I would like to ask for some help on this.
Call on a friend. Phone a friend. That's what it is, right?
Gary, are you trying to answer that question?
Yes, Chair Rios and Member Aguilar Medrano. Residential fences on the side property and rear property is maximum 6 feet. And if it's like the front, it would have to probably be a maximum allowable height. We calculate that one.
Okay, so I just asked, the one by the parking area is 8 feet, so is that not allowed? Sounds like what you're saying. It should be a maximum of 6.
It should be maximum 6.
Okay, thank you. That was my understanding, but I just wanted to make sure I had that right. That's all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
If nothing further, will the applicant or applicants please come forward and get sworn in?
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Alexander Dezurek, Principal of Autotruth Design. We're located at 222 East Marcy Street, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87501.
Thank you.
I would actually like to have our client, the principal applicant, give an initial statement, and then I'll walk you all through the design and answer any questions that you may have.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Megan Davis Mercer, and we live at 1047A Camino Santa Casa. Madam Chair and members of the Historic Board, thank you. My name is Megan Davis Mercer, owner of 1047A with my husband Jason and our daughter Orion, who's the youngest of 3.
Thank you. And speak right into that mic so we can all hear you.
I I fell in love with Santa Fe as a student at St. John's College. Returning here with my husband and 3 kids and dog to make this corner of earth our forever home has been the privilege of a lifetime. We were looking for a home for years, and when we found 1047A, we loved it immediately and wanted to care for it. Our goal has been to honor the charm of our home while working creatively with the challenges it has presented for a family with growing kids. We've had the good fortune to work with architects Christopher, Alexi, and Christina in a spirit of collaboration and deep respect for our neighbors and the history here. Alexi can speak to the specifics of our project, but I just wanted to take a moment to thank our neighbors, some of whom are here tonight, and our architects, and the board for your time and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Give me 1 second to plug in, everybody. Chair Rios and members of the Historic Design Review Board, our District Review Board, we thank you for the opportunity to present this project and for your careful consideration tonight. Chair Rios, as you so noted, yes, the project site is at the end of a long dirt driveway off of Camino San Acacio. And as you see, and it actually slopes down, so Camino San Acacio is kind of paralleling the topography here, and the various sites that are along this driveway step down to our site that's at the very end. It's an extremely tight site. You see the existing site plan and footprint here. And you notice there is not a whole lot of room to add on for several bedrooms, which was the primary goal of this project, was expanding the home for 3 children and their parents. We are proposing to increase or improve, I should say, the entry sequence through parking area here, the addition of a gate and a bike storage area. Member Madeline Aguilar Medrano, the question about the fence that is in this area here, we are actually considering this part of a structure, which is the bike shed here that then extends over to the property wall there. Although that is something that we're definitely able to consider and look at moving forward. But that was the reason why it was 8 feet. We need to get 8 feet to get that bike shed in there. We want to create a kind of a simple stucco wall facing there. We've got a gate that then leads into an improved entry courtyard that is right here that right now you kind of step up and then step down and then step back up again to get into the door over here. We're going to replace that with several steps, adding a patio and then a water feature down there. We're trying to preserve most of the exterior of the site for exterior living, because there really is not very much on the property. There's an existing 4-foot-high retaining wall here, a 6-foot-high fence, and then a 2-story building that is right there. So in order to have a good quality south-facing outdoors, we tried to preserve this as great as possible. And so in looking at this, the only place that we were able to add on some significant square footage for these additional bedrooms was to remove a portion of the house in the center here, which I'll show you in the floor plans in a second, and create a split level addition to then make up that difference, and thereby preserving most of that south-facing outdoors area there. Wrapping around the building, there's an existing deck that has a hot tub on it, as well as an improved patio that's off of the kitchen area there. Here's the floor plans that Ramon was showing earlier. The existing floor plan has this kind of character-defining circular room, which everybody loves and fell in love with. There is a former art studio that is on the north side, and then this really funky, described as a guest house that was attached to it, and then a later 2019 edition that had removed a carport and created a more usable kind of kitchen space and living room space over here. What we're proposing to do is to remove this center section here. This is a very odd space where you step down several steps a foot lower here to get to this level, and then kind of meander through this former space to get over to the kitchen area. So what we're proposing to do is remove that section and create a split level addition here. So we're still honoring that foot down from the initial circular room structure here, connecting all these now on the same level here, creating a bedroom and a study area, and then stacking bathrooms on a curved portion of the addition that kind of mimics and complements the round portion of the house. Some minor renovations to create some bedrooms in the former studio, removal of some laundry equipment and a shower in this space to create an office. And then a little bit of reconfiguration of storage and improvements to the kitchen area that then lead out to that patio and trellis feature that are on the east side of the property. On the upper level, it is kind of an interesting house in that we've got a bunch of different levels. There's a kind of a loft level inside of the round space here. We then have a second level above that and a slightly depressed sunken lower level there with a staircase leading up, primary bedroom, suite, and bathroom over here. And then we're manipulating some of the parapets on the roof of the existing 2019 addition to create a cascading roof form leading from the highest portion of the structure down, kind of creating that quintessential Santa Fe massing. Looking at the elevations, the south elevation, which I think really kind of describes what we're trying to do on the project. We've got the rounded form of the circular living room space here. We've got now the curved element of the bathroom portion of the addition. We then have the primary suite above, a small deck and balcony there with a kind of a hallway sunroom space that then connects the addition down to the existing or the previous 2019 addition. Trellis off on the east side. And then to speak to the point about the gate and the yard wall feature out there, there is an entrance gate here. Behind here is that bike storage area, and we're proposing just to keep a nice clean wall that goes over to the property line there. Then moving over to the south and north elevation, or sorry, the east and west elevations. On the west elevation, existing, new, we're proposing to remove and reconstruct. There's an existing Ramada structure here that's not in very good shape, and it's kind of set up on kind of a railroad tie stepped foundation that just is not stable. So we're proposing to essentially replace that Ramada, create a small entry vestibule that would be underneath that roofed area for a new entry door there, and then the steps down to a kind of a lower area with a water feature there. And then on the east facade, some slight changes to the 2019 addition to create a bank of windows, and then create a trellis structure above that, you know, creating a nice outdoor eating area and patio with a little area to store your barbecue inside a little storage closet there. That is the overview of the design, and I'm happy to stand for any questions that you may have.
Thank you for your presentation. Board members, do you have questions at this time or comments? Member Aguilar-Padrón.
More of a personal comment. You had some funny geometry here to work with, so I definitely commend you
You did indeed.
getting this house suitable for, you know, 5-person family, and also just so welcome back to Santa Fe. I have a niece who's at St. John's, so I can see why you fell in love with it through the lens of St. John's, the beautiful campus, and super excited to have you guys back, and that we, you know, I would get to have some more kids on the east side, and I think that's always a good thing, and will hopefully invigorate the neighborhood.
Anything else, board members? Member Beachside.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question. I think you referred to a 2-story house neighboring this property. Can you just describe, are there other 2-story houses on the street or nearby?
I know that specifically this house right adjacent to our site to the south is 2 stories. And again, it's also on an elevated platform because the site's stepped down from Santa Cassia down to there. I'll be honest, I'm trying to remember if any of these are 2 stories. I believe some of these are 1 stories. I don't know about these kind of, this one right here.
There are no further questions. I will ask if anyone in the audience, yes, Miss Heather.
Thank you, Chair Rios. Just one quick point on the proposed 8-foot wall. If it's a freestanding wall, zoning does not permit 8 feet in residential zone districts. So if they would want to pursue 8 feet at that location, they would have to get a variance before the Board of Adjustment. Just a clarification.
Thank you for that clarification. Anyone in this audience wishing to speak on this particular project, please come forward.
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
You,
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Will Clift, 521 Camino Don Miguel, 87505. So I first met the Mercers while we were both walking our young children to school down at Acequia Madre. And as I think one of the counselors suggested, the east side is a tough spot for families with young children. And it's really that the more we can do to allow families to come and be in this area, the better, as opposed to having an Airbnb or just another second home. So I really encourage the approval of these plans so that the Mercers can stay. Also, I live on Camino Don Miguel, which is just around the corner from the property, and we also have a two-story house. We're right on Don Miguel, much more visible. So I think their plan is it's a wonderful plan. This is going to be a great addition to the neighborhood. I know this house. I've walked past it many times, far predating when they moved in, and I think everything suggested is just going to be a benefit and an improvement. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name's Ashley Marcus and I live at 1047C, Camino San Acacio. So we literally can hang our arms out the window and high five. I also have a daughter who goes to Acequia Madre with their eldest son. And it is such a joy to have more children in the neighborhood and hear screaming and yelling. It's a welcomed thing. Also with my home, it's a two-story to answer your question. So their home is A, B is a two-story home, and then my home is two-story as well. So, and it is actually sitting higher, so it's more obstructive in terms of view. But I wrote a letter to give my support to the Mercers, and I just wanted to also speak to you all and say, you know, I fully support them, and we're very close by, so and we don't mind any kind of construction or noise or anything like to happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. Nelson Denman, 1002.5 Canyon Road, Santa Fe. I am just one to speak in support of the Mercers and their family. I think this project would be a beautiful addition to the house as well as the neighborhood. And it would be great to have more family in the neighborhood, which is my neighborhood as well. So I hope you support this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else in this audience wishing to comment? No one else? Anyone on Zoom?
No, sure, yes.
Did you say no?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say I'm also delighted that young people are in the neighborhood because I have to tell you, I feel that I'm in that area and I grew up in the neighborhood of Camino de Montesol and still live there. And not that I'm saying anything against the older generation because I is one of them. But I'm delighted to see younger people and I'm delighted to see this, your daughter. And also I saw two young men in the audience. I don't know what the heck they're doing here at the H board meeting. I can think of a lot of other things they might want to be doing. I don't know, but I guess we'll hear from them later. But yeah, I'm delighted to see young faces in the audience, but let's see what this board is going to do about your project. Board members, I will entertain a motion. Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Case 2023-007721, HDRB 1047A, Camino San Acacio. I move that the board approve the project as submitted with the note that the front yard wall and bike storage area is approved to the allowable height of 6 feet per 6 feet per staff. And that drawings be updated to reflect that.
And do I hear a second?
Aguilar Madrano will second.
Anything further? Nothing further. Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Madrano,
Yes.
Member Beachai,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida,
Yes.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Valdo.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Good luck. Next case is located at 425 Apodaca Hill. I'm going to guess that the applicants are here. Oh, I see Gala. And this is Heather's case.
I promise there'll be fewer and fewer of these where I present. So, the HDRB may recall back in July 13th, 2023, this case was considered for historic status. And at that time, it was designated as non-contributing. So this case, 2023-7738, is currently a request for demolition. If you may recall from the last hearing, I mentioned to the board that there was an emergency action that was needed based on analysis from the applicant's engineer as well as the chief building official. And so they applied for a demolition permit already. But I did want to bring this before the board for an official approval as required. So these aerials illustrate the evolution of the building, just as you may recall from the status review. The original building is outlined in the orange, and then it evolved over time, green being the second portion of the building, and then a final addition to the northeast on that building. When we visited the site, it was in pretty rough shape already. There were issues with the roof as well as with the structure overall. Just to note that also the windows were replaced back in the early 2000s through a Habitat for Humanity project to assist the longtime property owner that was at that site, that lived at that site. And these are the different elevations that were shown to you at the time of the status review. Here are some conditions. This is part of the assessment report that's in your packet, and an assessment of the condition of the interior of the house. And you can see some failing of the walls and the roof. And so for the board's reference, the criteria for demolition include a report on the historic and architectural significance of the structure. This was designated as not contributing. Step was already done previously. A report from the city building inspector, which you have in your packet, on the state of repair and structural stability of the structure. And if the structure is more than 75 years old and the entire project of which demolition is part requires an archaeological clearance permit, a report from the land use director on whether the demolition would damage possible artifacts. And at this point, there will be no archaeological analysis. If the site disturbs more than 2,500 square feet and if new construction is proposed, then an archaeological report will be required at that time. And any other information that may be requested by this or the governing body. Staff recommends demolition of the proposed project due to the poor condition of the structure and the potential threat to public health, safety, and welfare. There is concern with collapse, and that therefore staff recommends approval, and that concludes my presentation.
Any questions for Heather? No questions for Heather. Applicants, please come forward, get sworn in.
Will you both be speaking? Okay, you go ahead and I'll swear both of you in it together. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimonies you're about to give are the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. When you step to the podium, please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. I'm Gayla Bechtel, 320 Aztec Street, Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'm going to hand it over to Paul Babcock, the owner of the property.
Paul Babcock, 423B, Apodaca Hill. Madam Chair, members of the governing body, Madam Chair, members of the board, I thank you for the opportunity to come again in front of you to request the demolition permit for this property. This property was my grandmother's house. I am the fifth generation of the Apodaca descendants. My mother, being Ernestine Babcock, my grandmother, Anita Valdez, her grandmother, my great-grandmother, Carlosita Apodaca, and Jose Emilio Apodaca. We bought this house from my uncle in 2021 with the plans to build for the sixth generation of my children here. We didn't realize the shape the structure was in when we bought it from my uncle. We were actually trying to save some of it because I was born and raised. My aunt and my grandmother actually took care of me there. And the historic significance meant a lot to me to keep that structure. After further review, it just wasn't cost effective. So we had to go out and talk to engineers. There's a report, I believe, in your package from Eric Trujillo. And the cost to save any part of the structure would just not make it buildable for me to provide a home for one of my boys. My wife's plan and my plan, I have three boys. One actually just flew in from Santa Monica tonight for this meeting, and we'll go back for college tomorrow. But the current house we live, my grandmother's house in a vacant lot, all in the same vicinity, is to leave residence or property to our family. To the north end of this residence, 425, is my sister's house, 425 and a half Apodaca Hill. Her name's Roberta Garcia. To the west of my grandmother's house, 425 Apodaca Hill, is my other sister, Angela Gomez. And then I have relatives all around our neighborhood. So as I said earlier, fifth generation here, hoping to pass it out to the sixth generation of so many of younger generations being able to live on the east side of town. And I stand for questions.
Any questions for Mr. Babcock? No questions. I just have a comment. Longtime Santa Fe right here. So happy to hear that the house is being kept in the family and that you have a lot of surrounding relatives, primos in the neighborhood.
Yes.
And glad to hear that. It makes my heart very happy. So anyway, with that being said, is there anyone in this audience wishing to comment on this project? Yes, young man, come forward.
Hi. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I'm Tyler Babcock. I live at 423B Apodaca Hill. So as my dad said, we're sixth generation Santa Feans, and I'm living in LA right now. I do love LA and the things that are there, but there's nothing quite like Santa Fe. Just made me appreciate being in this city more, and I want to stick through and through with my siblings and hopefully continue our long generation on the hill. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No one else? And was it, oh, young man, come forward.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
William Babcock, 423B Apodaca Hill. Good evening, Madam Chair and Board of Members. Me personally, I plan on staying in Santa Fe long-term, even after college. And I feel like it's just special to our family, that the area that we're in. And, you know, even driving to school every day, I see cousins and people that I know. And I think that it's special to keep it within our family, but also I feel like it has to be nice. And the photos, I feel like they speak for themselves. The property's inhabitable right now. And so, yeah, I just hope this goes the way that it needs to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Board members, I will entertain a motion. Member Guida.
Case 2024-007-738 HDRB 425 Apodaca Hill. I move that the board approve the demolition, noting that the demolition criteria have been met.
Aguilar Madrano will second.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Beachide?
Yes.
Member Bienvenue?
Yes.
Member Guida?
Yes.
Member Mather?
Yes.
Member Valdo?
Yes.
Member Aguilar Madrano?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much, and thank you all. Next case is located at 912 Old Santa Fe Trail, and that is Ramon's case.
IT, can you show the laptop? Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the board, this is case number 2023-007722-HDRB. 912 Old Santa Fe Trail is a single-family residence in the downtown and east side historic district. This structure was most recently heard before the board on November 14th, 2023, when the status was determined to be non-contributing. The applicant now requests approval for exterior renovations. The property is located on the south side of the street and just west of Amelia White Park. The property is outlined in red here. The site plan showing the existing residence in blue and the proposed entry portal and trellis to the entry portal to the north and a trellis to the south. They're outlined in red. This is the north or front elevation. The architectural style is mid-modern with an estimated construction date of the late 1950s. Research shows no significant improvements or alterations. This is kind of an oblique view of the north and west elevations. The south elevation. This would be where the new trellis would be located. The east elevation and if the carport would be converted into an office and a storage space. The existing and proposed floor plans. The proposed entrance portal and new trellises are outlined in red. North and south elevations existing above and proposed below, respectively. East and west elevations, again, existing above and the proposed below, respectively. The material palette. Staff recommends approval of the proposed project and finds that the application complies with sections 14-5.2D general design standards for all historic districts and 14-5.2E downtown and east side design standards. With that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Ramon. Board members, questions for Ramon? No questions for you, Ramon? Applicant, please come forward and get sworn in.
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Sunil, last name Sakalkar, 722 Gildersleeve Street, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Yes, sir. What do you have to tell us?
I have not much to add on to what Ramon has already talked about. We are doing a simple addition by capturing the spaces we already have, and we are trying to be consistent with the existing simple structural grid that is already there in the house, and we are modifying that to bring out more spaces by capturing the existing carport into useful interior spaces and adding portals to add more character to the house, because the entry is non-significant. It's almost lost in the front, and the back part, we are mostly doing it to capture exterior outdoor spaces for dining and also to block some of the west light that will come back, south and west light that will, it overheats the spaces inside. And that's the main reason for all these additions.
Would you explain to us a little bit about that front porch and about the height that it's at, and why you are proposing to make it higher than the existing home?
I think, as I said, if you look at the photograph of the front, the entry is almost hidden. And that was one of the reasons of raising the I think the intention was to bring the more importance to the entry. And that is the reason the height is a little higher. Also, one of the reasons for the, as you see the roof slopes towards the entry, right now there is only a small rain capture trim that is added to the existing trim facade. And we wanted to create a little parapet so that we can capture all the water and divert it back so that it can be directed out. And it was coming from more or less practical approach of what is the height that we can use before we start adding and capturing all the water before it starts getting on the front. And we probably might modify that a little bit to make it maybe a little bit lower as we start looking at proper slope to bring the water back and see how that works out.
Thank you for that explanation. Any other questions? Member Bichai.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for raising that issue. I had a similar question about the portal, and I'm not an architect, but I sort of had the impression that an inset entry was more typical for a mid-century modern house. Like, I appreciate if you correct me if I'm wrong. And the addition of the portal seems to emphasize the offset nature of the front door. It's not, centered, which I think is, deliberate in the design, but with the portal, it sort of enhances that. It makes it look a bit different. So yeah, maybe somebody can enlighten me on how portals do or don't fit into mid-century modern design.
I don't know whether I can comment on that at this point, but I would take a look at that again to see how it can be more consistent with the rest of the portal additions that we are doing.
And I had a second question. I think in the packet, it seems to indicate that there's a choice to be made on the stucco color. Which is your preference?
I think the alternate number 1 is our preference, but again, when we are done with all the ongoing remodel of the windows that we already have a permit for, we would like to actually get the samples and see which color actually works well with the light, and then we can make the decision based on that. Okay. It was my intention to just give a couple of alternates for discussion if there is a preference for that, because we were not 100% sure of which one to look at without getting a bigger sample made.
And is alternate 1 cottonwood? I just ask because I believe cottonwood is on our list of sort of colors that we typically don't endorse. What is our position on that? We're requiring exceptions for those colors, or?
Word review.
board review, yeah. So the other one, tumbleweed or tumblewood is, there's no problem with that one, but the cottonwood we'd have to consider as part of the motion to explicitly allow that color. I think it tends more to the white that is not neatly fit within the earth tone colors that we typically approve.
I think because of the low scale of the house, we wanted to stay with a lighter tone of the stucco instead of going darker, because the adjacent homes have the darker color, and it really pops out in a not so good way. And that's why we wanted to get a subtle color to work with this simple home. That was the main intention behind that.
Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, Sunil. I think this is overall a very kind of elegant solution to the problems that this house has. And I think, we're not talking about a huge renovation. We're not talking about huge additions or big changes to the house. It's making use of space that kind of already exists and mostly adding these portals in a way that seems to be consistent with the architecture of the existing house. I certainly think that's the case on the back, but I do agree with the other board members that I think, if you are to add a front portal to this house, that it should respect the eave line of the house and not jump above it. I understand the point about kind of announcing the entry. Maybe there are other tricks in your toolkit to do that. It could be the paint color in the inset portion of the facade as it is now, or some other thing. But I think it would be more consistent with the house and with the elegance of the overall proposal for it not to kind of hop up past the existing roof line. And we noticed that the most on the side views of it, where we kind of see it terminate just out in space. So that would be my one recommendation for the portals. The other question I had was about the windows. I noticed that the existing house has period steel casement windows throughout, and they're painted white. And again, we're dealing with non-contributing structure. We're dealing with something that's pretty, not really something. It happens to be bridging this district, not really characteristic of the district. I noticed the proposal requests 2 vinyl windows, and that would be all vinyl, right? That's what.
Yes.
My hesitation about that is just the kind of, I'm fine with using a kind of more, because we can't get those same casements. I'm fine with using a more contemporary solution for these new windows to the house, but I would hesitate to approve a vinyl window. They're much thicker. They look really plasticky, and I'm just wondering if there might be another solution that's more consistent with the slim lines of the existing windows. I know Geldwin makes a very narrow line, all metal window, and it might be that that may be a better solution for the windows and coordinating with the existing. Would you be open to considering a slim metal window?
The decision for the vinyl was purely financial, because we looked at some of the other window types.
Okay.
And the cost factor was significant for the type of the house that we are dealing with. And I think vinyl windows offered the price point and the simplicity that we could afford for this project. So that was the purely.
Sure. I know that the all metal gelled ones are pretty affordable. And I'm just wondering from staff, do we have a hard and fast rule against all vinyl windows in the historic districts?
Chair Rios, Member Guida, with reference to all vinyl windows, typically it's associated with historic buildings that we have concerns. But there are certain design expectations in downtown and east side where the board traditionally has shunned away from the use of vinyl because it doesn't communicate Santa Fe style.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Any other comments or questions? Anyone in this audience wishing to comment on this case? Please come forward.
I'm going to go ahead and swear you in. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
It's Anne Marie Gallagher, and it's 912 Old Santa Fe Trail.
Yes, ma'am. You have the floor.
We, my husband and I, Jim, we purchased this house about 4 years ago, but we've lived in the house for almost 24 years. And we just love this house because it is a STAM home. And we wanted Sunil to help us find a way to keep everything the way it was designed, because we thought he was brilliant the way he fixed it up way back in 1950, as he has done other homes in Santa Fe. And we live on a property that is quite large. It's almost an acre. And it, to me, if other people who might have a lot of money could easily maybe come in and tear this house down. But so Sunil helped us put this plan together, and we went to a company here in Santa Fe called Sierra Pacific for the windows to get their consultation on that. And he has done many STAM homes in the area. He did recommend a vinyl window. It keeps it very much in line with what we have, and we wanted that really clean white look. We could not afford the wooden windows. So we went with the idea of wanting to keep what we can. We want to do white, and we want to keep the line almost exactly with what you see. The quality and the look, from what I've seen on the other STEM homes that he's done, is really lovely and looks very similar to what you see in the pictures there. So I just wanted to state that we had done a lot of research on replacing it, and talked to people who had also, this representative from Sierra Pacific on, what he had done with other homes. And then as far as the portals go, yes, it does add a lot of street appeal to the home. And I love Sunil's design, but I thought that your recommendations also were very good. I know he can work with those to make the front portal as you envision it. So that, I think that's all I needed to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I always feel that it's very important for the owners to come before the board and comment, because after all, you're the ones that are going to be living there. And so I always feel that it's important to hear from the owners. So thank you for your comments.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's see if any board members have any questions or further comments. Yes.
There's somebody on Zoom that would like to speak.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to gather that no one else in this room is going to speak? No. Zoom, go ahead.
Yes, Chair Rios, Stephanie Benenato. She has been previously sworn. You may unmute.
Thank you, Stephanie Benenato. I appreciate the board's discussion on the portal on the entry, at the entry. And I too think that it should be lowered down and be more in line with the house itself. I have seen and looked at many houses that have vinyl windows, and I think that you get that it's a vinyl window pretty quickly. I understand that cost is a factor, but I think that, that if it's a few windows there at the front of the house, that it won't be that expensive to get real glass. And as I think Member Guida said, there is a line of steel or metal windows that could serve that purpose and would be in keeping with the windows that are actually in the house. So I hope you look at that a little more closely. I think the wraparound, I think it's glass enclosed. I'm sorry, I didn't really look closely at the plans, but I really think that's a wonderful idea to make it a more usable house. Thank you.
Thank you. No one else on Zoom?
No, Chair Rios.
Board members, I'm ready for a motion.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion.
Please.
Case 2023-007-722 HDRB 912 Old Santa Fe Trail. I move that the board approve the project as submitted with the following notes: that the front portal design be reduced in height to match the height of the existing roof line of the house, and that the applicant propose a different window, either vinyl or metal, that adequately reflects the kind of thin profile of the existing windows of the house, and that the applicant update the application for staff approval.
Is there a second?
Madam Chair, can I recommend a friendly amendment to see if
Let's have a second to the motion first.
I can second?
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Aguilar Madrano will second, and seeing if Member Guida is open to a friendly amendment that the applicant not choose alternative 1 for the stucco color, which is cottonwood, which is stated that we're not supposed to use in the East Side District. So if they could either choose alternate 2 or propose a different color to be reviewed by staff.
Accepted as friendly. Thank you for that.
Anything else?
And just by way
Member
of,
Beachey.
thank you, Madam Chair, by way of discussion, I noticed the house is quite light already. So I don't know if cottonwood would sort of match what's there. Maybe the applicant can tell us if it's close in color. I know we're in the middle of the motion. But noticed it's like
Thinking along
actually a
those
really light
lines.
color. So I think, keeping it the same would not be objectionable.
Yeah, I think that was one of the goals, because going with the darker color alternate was really, I mean, we can go with it, but prefer cottonwood or a lighter tone like that.
I personally think that's a good point that is made, because the house is already light and it's very different in style.
There are lighter stucco colors that are on our approved list, though, that aren't cottonwood. Did you look at the other light options?
No, not yet.
Well, perhaps you could do that. Maybe the amendment could be that they could look at other lighter colors, and that staff could be the ones that would be looking at those colors and recommending them. Or that the applicant could work with staff and you could approve that. Would that be okay with the maker of the motion?
Yes, Madam Chair.
So roll call vote, please.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Madam Chair.
Oh,
Sorry to
excuse
interrupt.
me. Member Beachey.
I wonder if we should clarify for the motion that the staff could also approve the window design.
I think we did,
comfortable.
but yes, that
Oh, we
that
did,
would
okay.
be for staff approval.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Member Bienvenue. Member Guida,
Yes.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Valdo,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Madrano,
Yes.
Member Beachide.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you all. Last case this evening is located at 60 East San Francisco Street, and that is Heather's case.
All right.
Yes, Heather.
Thank you, Chair Rios, members of the board. Last but not least is a building that's sort of near and dear to my heart. I was involved with a portion of the remodel that's known as the Five and Dime. As I go through this presentation, you will see that what was known as the Woolworth Building has been through lots of different iterations before the request tonight. So you can see in this photograph that the Woolworth Building was originally not completely composed of both sides of the building that you see today. So the side on the right where the two windows are, I don't know if you can see my cursor, But the two upper story windows, well, there's a window and a door. That portion is now the 5 and dime. So, but the Woolworth building originally developed from west to east. And so where the Goodman sign is here, and then there was another tenement space that was a grocery store. Those were actually removed, and the Woolworth building expanded to the west to what was in the J.C. Penney building. Previously, it was the Penny buildings was the location of the military chapel La Castrense, historically. So just to illustrate those changes, back in 1998, the 5 and dime building was reviewed and approved. As part of the sale of a Woolworth building, there was a desire to keep the Frito pie and other aspects of what was Woolworths there. And so the owner at that time decided to divide off that piece and create the 5 and dime, which is beloved to the community now. Then in the 2000s, the Santa Fe Arcade remodel occurred. And so the rest of the Woolworth building was remodeled to include sort of that interior mall area that is in the arcade building, plus that second story renovation. One of the components of that renovation included keeping the window that's at what was at the center of the Woolworth building facade, and keeping also the step back that was at that facade as well. So there are French doors that access that upper balcony now, but previously it was also a step back, but a slider step back. So as you can see here, and by the way, there are some additional drawings on your desks that I included in the packet that had some renderings as well, so that I omitted from the computer generated packet. So once again, illustrating the step of the facade. It's certainly not as much as it was previously, but it was stepped back further in the early 2000s. And this is an illustration of the existing facade. As you can tell, there's been a lot of changes to the facade over time. The building itself is designated as non-contributing. This is an illustration of the proposed scope of work. So the applicant would like to keep the deck as well as the railing that is there, but add a new portal and enclose the stepped back area of what is currently the balcony right now. And with the elevations, you can see that the French doors will be similar to what's there now on the left-hand side, but replicated on the right-hand side or the western end of the building, with windows at the center as well, with open with panels that can open. My apologies. So also the applicant is proposing to retain the white color that was previously on a portion of the facade, but was changed in the early 2000s remodel. So, and that white color was also replicated over on the J.C. Penney building as well, and is currently in that character. So it would continue the character of the facade, starting at the 5 and dime store and continuing across to the end of the Penny's building. And staff finds that the downtown East Side Historic District design standards have been met and recommends approval.
Any questions for Heather, board members? Or any comments? Yes, Member Aguilar-Madrona.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Heather, the window that's there from when it was the original building, was that the original window, or was the placement just replicated?
I'll defer to the applicant as to the placement, but it's my understanding that that was a Woolworth window. Just one moment. Let me share my screen again. Back. Going back to the more historic photograph. So previously, when it was the Woolworth building, that window style was there at that time. And this is before the expansion that happened in the 50s.
And has the building or any part of it ever been up for a status review? When was the most recent?
Chair Member Aguilar Medrano, the Higbee form is from the 1980s, and then there was a 1992 analysis that was done on it. There has been no change. That was one of the issues with the downtown, is that we don't have as much information as we want. And so that's the purpose of that one grant that Nicole mentioned earlier. But there has been additional work done on understanding the history of the building, but no updated Higbee.
Heather.
Any other questions? No questions? Applicant or applicants, please get sworn in.
Okay. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Tom Ortiz, Tom Ortiz Design. I'm at 52 Condesa Road in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The owners would like to make a statement for myself. They're online.
Okay, thank you.
So the owners of the people who are leasing the space are Quinn and Nicole Stevenson, who own Santa Cafe and Coyote Cafe. And they've taken over what is now the whole entire second floor of that building from Water Street to San Francisco Street. And I think Quinn would like to speak a little bit about, they're both local Santa fans and big devotion to running very successful businesses here in Santa Fe.
And Mr.
Yes, I'm
Stevenson,
here.
you can unmute. Please state your name and address for the record and be sworn.
My name is Quinn Stevenson, 132 Water Street. Santa
Thank you.
Fe,
Do
New
you swear
Mexico.
under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Yes, good evening. We are listening to you.
Just wanted to thank you for your time tonight. As Tom said, I'm born and raised Santa Fe and very proud of the career I built in the restaurant industry here. I started bussing tables in the mid 90s, and I've worked at Coyote Cafe for 25 plus years. But with this new project, I realize there's a responsibility of owning a business on the plaza, and I don't take that lightly. This is 100% financially coming out of my pocket, this remodel. So I'm trying to continue to invest in our community, and I hope it brings more business to our downtown area. And I'll turn it over to Tom and Bill there. I hope you like what they have to show you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So I'd like to start off with maybe an answer to one of the questions that the board members had, which was the original Woolworths window and all of that was removed because now that new structure that was built in part of the Woolworths building, it's all a new concrete construction. It was all in 2000, and I think at some point they chose to replicate a window that was part of Woolworths, but it's not the actual original, historic window of Woolworths. And then when we started looking at the building, to us, what seemed really clear was that the arcade building that was added was done in a very traditional Pueblo style way, with a very central entrance access down the center. Very similar to the National Bank and some of the other meme buildings and some of the other structures, stores that are really right down this street from San Francisco Street, where they have a central sort of arcade entrance, and that the architecture above also reflected that.
Whereas in this building, they had chosen that it was going to be this sort of asymmetrical situation where there was would seem like it should be a center window somewhere, but it's not. And it actually had come out, it protrudes fairly far into towards the plaza. I think it's like a 9 or 10 feet. 9 or 10 feet. So our proposal is to really build to have a portal that gives you that sort of layering on the plaza. It increased the amount of patio space that they're using in the front of this building. Part of that is over the portal, which is a city, the building. They're leasing that space, the patio space, from the city. But our proposal is to put a portal that stretches from one side to the other, making it more symmetrical and more in keeping with kind of the existing building on the ground level with the portal there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Can you tell us how much higher this building is to the buildings of to its left and its right?
I don't know the exact dimensions, but we're not changing any of the parapet heights or any dimensions on that. We're basically matching anything.
Right, but do you know how much, maybe, who was the person on this? Heather? Do you know how much higher this building is than the buildings to the right and the left of it?
I think they're within 2 or 3 feet of each other. And they may be parallel.
Let me share my screen so that you can see. Just wait a moment.
Like there's an elevation, there's a plaza elevation showing this building in relation to the entire San Francisco Street facades.
Yes, and so this is the elevation drawing with which you were referencing.
Yep.
And let me zoom in here a little bit. So that you can see. Second. Too many different things going on with the Zoom, as well as the PowerPoint. Darn it. Here we go.
So it seems to be parallel to the Mission Church that's on the left, slightly higher than what the Woolworth parapet is. But those are all heights that have been, we're not adding.
And all of those buildings on that side of the plaza, they're all on varying heights, correct? There are
Yes, Cherry, yes.
some taller than this one, some lower.
Yes, that's correct.
Other questions, board members? Member Guida?
Just a comment. I really appreciate the presentation of the drawings that we have in the printed packet. I think Heather, great staff presentation, and applicant also excellent set of drawings to help us understand not only the evolution of the building over time, the history that isn't there, and then really this elevation, which really shows the building in the streetscape context. And I think to me that's one of the most important drawings, not only in terms of showing kind of what a kind of Frankenstein the existing building is, because it has, maybe it was well intended, kind of historically sensitive design, but right, the building wasn't symmetrical. It was a kind of weird vestige. It's not the original material, and it's centralized on the lower floor but offset on the top, and so it's a building that's really neither here nor there. And I think that beyond the kind of the kind of pure elevational composition that's odd in the existing building, I think the other thing that's really remarkably out of place about the existing structure is the depth, at least on one side of the deck. It makes it look like it was something built at a mall, or because it has this enormously deep roof deck on the one side. And I think what this design accomplishes in bringing that with the same amount, perhaps more dining space outside, but by bringing that facade of the portal out, It brings it into alignment with the rest of the streetscape and diminishes the visual impression of the depth of that upper story deck. And so, well done. And I think it's a, infinitely better building than what's there right now.
Thank you. And
Thank you,
Bill
Member
Kleinschmidt
Guida.
is the architect on it as well.
Any other questions or comments, other board members? It looks like there's no one else in the audience. And anyone on Zoom?
Chair Rios, yes, Stephanie Beninato would like to speak.
Okay.
You may unmute. She's previously sworn.
Yeah, Stephanie Beninato. It's really interesting to hear that the city is now renting space over the sidewalk, not just on the sidewalk, not just on the street, but over the sidewalk as well. And although some people like symmetry, I kind of like the asymmetrical character of that. I can appreciate wanting to have more secured space so that when the weather is bad, you have some shelter there. But I don't know. I think that the whole character of the plaza has changed and is still changing and is catering to people who pay $52 for entrees for dinner. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom?
No, Chair Rios.
Motion, please, board members.
I'll be happy to make a motion, Madam Chair.
Yes.
2024-007-742 HDRB 60 East San Francisco Street. This is the Santa Fe Arcade Building. I move that the board approve the project as submitted.
Do I hear a second?
Mather will second.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Guida,
Yes.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Baldo,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Beachide,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much.
you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
and good luck on your project.
Thank you.
Any discussion items?
Chair Rios, none from staff.
Matters from the board, anybody? Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to return to the earlier discussion about the review of cases that are caught out on this text amendment issue. Cases that were recommended for approval to the board because of their exceptions, but now apparently, according to the city attorney, have to come back to the board. And I would like to propose that we not reopen all of those decided cases, that we review them as if on a consent agenda and simply approve them to put this chapter behind us.
Views of other board members? Member Beachside?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, at least from my perspective, on these cases, we simply substituted a recommendation to governing body where we would have previously just issued full approval. So I don't see any reason the decisions of the board would have changed. It wasn't like we were seeking another opinion. It was just, we were just doing what was requested by the city attorney. So I would be in favor of actually just like listing out the cases that require a decision and approving them with a consent agenda, if that's possible. I don't know that we've done that before, but we certainly don't need to rehear the cases.
Any other opinions in reference to this? Yes, Member Aguilar is on.
Maybe just a question for staff. I can't remember all of them now. Did we have any that we were recommending denial? Do you know if there are any, because I'm just curious if I agree with what the member Guida and Beachide said about I'd be fine listing them for approval, but I'm just curious, how are we going to handle one if we had one that was a recommended denial?
Member Aguilar Medrano, there was none that were recommended for denial. And just as to the Frank unmuted, so as to the procedure, I'll defer to him. But what we had planned on as staff when we discussed it was having one slide and provide you with the packet that was provided before and just do a 2 or 3 sentence type of statement and have you act. I don't know if we need to have a de novo public hearing though.
I think the issue there is, while there's no reason for the board to hear the entire project proposal all over again. I think that there's some presumption that the public has to be given the opportunity to address the board again in light of the fact that the board now has approval authority and not just recommendation authority. There may have been, and I don't know that there's any specific evidence of this, but the public may have felt like we can address this again when it goes to the governing body, but now that it's not going to the governing body, they should have the opportunity to address the board.
But the public had an opportunity to speak when we were addressing the case, correct?
Well, they had the opportunity, but they may not have had the motivation because they thought the board didn't have the final authority. You know, I think that's the reasoning behind that. I have no objection to any kind of, some kind of expedited procedure, but I know the consent agenda is limited to, I believe, matters that have been recommended by a subcommittee. They have to go to a subcommittee, then they go to the governing body on the consent agenda because there had been a recommendation and evaluation by the subcommittee. I think that's the issue there. So regardless of whether we call it what we call it, I would not encourage the board to consider it as a consent agenda item. I also wanted to clarify something I said earlier when I was talking about the disadvantages of placing these before the governing body. And one is that land use items are placed at the very end of the agenda, and sometimes you don't get to them till 11 or midnight. And I didn't mean to suggest that that the governing body doesn't give them full consideration. But I had one situation where you may recall the exception appeal where there was a portal that was built out of character with old Santa Fe style. I believe that address was 703 Alameda. The applicant gave up on the agenda. The applicant texted me at about 11 o'clock and said, "I'm sorry, I just can't stay awake anymore." So I think, to be fair to everybody, to have them earlier in the evening, it's fair to the applicants, to the HP staff, and everybody else, that they not be stuck at the end of an agenda, which they may not get to them till midnight. So I agree with Ms. McSherry that there are a lot of advantages to just presenting them to this board again rather than presenting them to the governing body.
Well, I think everybody's on board to try to move those cases as quickly as possible. I mean, we already heard them. We were thorough with them. Everybody gave their comments. Yes.
I agree, Madam Chair, that the issue of speed of process is what's at stake here. If the city attorney's office has determined that we are to act in the role of the governing body by the nature of this revised text amendment, we are making, as Member Beachside pointed out, the recommendation to ourselves. I do not think we need to belabor this, and I'm just wondering, fine, put the information in the packet. We do this with the findings of fact and conclusions of law. They are there for the public. We often approve those as a slate. Let's, if we want to take public comment, fine, but I think the objective here is to get this done. And so if at all possible, my recommendation would be that these are presented on the agenda. If it's the first thing, then fine. But that we make a motion on all of them and pass them all at once.
Benvenue, I can tell
Madam
that
Chair.
you are thinking.
I'm thinking it's time to go, but I think we've spent more time talking about it tonight than we will resolving this. I mean, this is silly, in my opinion, to waste this much time. The staff has made it clear they're going to expedite the process. Whether it's a consent agenda or not, it's probably not going to make any difference. And it's a legal issue. I mean, the attorney would say it's a consent agenda item if the city attorney's office thought that was a possible procedure to follow. So they're trying to find what they find to be the legal procedure as well as the most efficient procedure. And I'm sure it's going to go very quickly.
Okay, that's what we all want. Quick. Okay, our next meeting is going to be February the 13th, 2024. And do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And do I hear the second?
Gilad Madrano seconds.
Roll call vote?
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Valdo,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Madrano,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,